In this video, we're going to build our own email builder app, just like Mailchimp, without writing a single line of code using a tool called Bubble. Now, before I say another word, let me show you a quick preview of exactly what we're going to build throughout this course. In this browser, we are taking a look at a preview of the email builder app that we will be creating throughout this course. Now, a critical part of any app that you build is giving it a great name. Me being from Australia, I have called this app Email Echidna. Now, our application will have 5 main sections, the first being this dashboard. This is just a graphical representation of how our users will be using our app, how many campaigns they've created, how many recipients they have in their database, and how many sends they have published to their recipients. There will be a campaign section, which is essentially where our users will create their email builds. There are recipients, who are the people who will receive our emails. And lastly, there are sends, which is just a bit of a record of a send that we have distributed to our recipients. Lastly, we have a settings page where we can allow users to edit their account or their company details. I'll go through a few of these shortly, but for now, let's get started in creating a new campaign. So if you've used an email builder tool before, like Mailchimp, the word campaign will be pretty familiar. Here we can see a list of all of the campaigns that I have created using this preview app. But let's get started in creating a new one. So when we click on this new button, a new campaign will be created and we will be taken to the campaign page. Now here you can see we are given the option to give our campaign a name. Let's just call this campaign for preview. We are given the option to display a subject line, so this will appear in our users' email inboxes. So let's just say, hi, this is an email. We can also see here a header image. This is loaded by default, which can be edited in the user's settings. However, I can choose to change that if I like. I'm not going to because I think this purple sky one looks awesome. And here I can add some body, which will be the content within my email. So I can say, hi there, this is a test email. Enjoy. Bye. Then I can choose to save my campaign. That will save that in my database. And then I can choose to send this email to my list of recipients. Now, quickly before I want to do that, we'll jump over to my recipients tab. And here I can see all the recipients that I have in my database. If I wanted to add another recipient, I could do that just by entering their name here, Shane K, and their email address. And then I hit create. And then we can see that our new recipient has been created. Heading back to my campaigns section, let me go into the campaign that I created, and I'm going to choose to send this email to my list of recipients. When I click this button, I have a confirmation page where I can say, are you sure you want to send this email to your 2 recipients? And I want to say, yes, I do. Once that email has been sent, I can head to my sends section and I can see that the email has in fact been sent. Here's my record of the email being sent. This is who it was sent to, which is great. If I then head into that contact, I can see that the email has been sent and that appears in their list as well. But most importantly, let me head to my email inbox and show you what was received on the user's end. So heading across to my Gmail, here we can see that it has come from my test business. It has come from the email address hello@emailechidna.com, and you can see it has the subject line, the email header, and the copy, as well as some unsubscribe links at the bottom. That is a great experience and a great app. Now I'm going to show you how to build this throughout our course. We're going to use a tool called SendGrid, and we are going to make this a great experience for our users to be able to customize their own account, create some campaigns, and send them to their database. If you've ever tried to build your own app or startup, I'm sure you know firsthand just how complicated the process can be.
Oh my God!
If you're anything like me and you don't know how to code, your options are quite limited. You can either try to source a technical co-founder, or you can pay a developer to build the app for you. Now, when it comes to paying someone to build an app using traditional code, I hope you're ready to make the choice between paying your first home deposit or building out a basic MVP. Now look, if none of these options seem suitable for you, don't stress, that's exactly what I'm here to help you with today. If you don't know how to code, Bubble is going to be your new best friend on your startup journey. Bubble is what's known as a no-code tool, which in simple terms just means that you can create fully functional apps without having to write a single line of code. Using Bubble, our team has been able to create absolutely any app you can imagine under the sun. So things like marketplaces, ride-sharing apps, meal delivery apps, matchmaking apps, and the list just truly goes on. While there are plenty of no-code tools that can help with certain parts of the app development process, Bubble is a full-stack solution. It allows you to not only design the interface of your app, stitch everything together using visual workflows to store data directly in your own database, and of course, integrate with third-party tools and services. Now look, each of these things would be a standalone no-code product, so it is truly insane to me that Bubble includes all of that in a single tool. Today, our focus is on creating our own email builder tool, kind of like Mailchimp. But if you've ever looked at the real-world Mailchimp app, you'll see how easy it is to get overwhelmed. There are just so many features in that app that I just won't have time to cover. But in this course, my main priority is building out 4 main features. We're going to build out our own WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, email builder. So that way your business can create custom branded emails. We're then going to create a CRM or database of recipients who are going to receive these emails once they've been sent. We're going to store those emails as records for historical reporting. And then finally, we're going to build out a data visualization feature, which is just going to allow us to display all of the information about our email activity in one single place. Now look, at this point in time, I've truly rambled on for long enough. Let's jump into our Bubble editor and we can dive right in. Throughout this module, we're just going to take the time to set up and configure our own custom database, which is going to be used to power the rest of our email builder app. In this module, the first thing that we are going to do when creating our email builder app is actually nothing to do with any customer-facing features, maybe something just as important, the custom database. Now, the concept of a custom database may be a bit daunting, especially if you're new to building apps. However, lucky for us, Bubble makes this super simple. Throughout this module, I'm hoping to make it just as simple by referring to this checklist that I've generated in Notion. Notion's an awesome documentation tool, and a link to this exact checklist will be available in the description of this course for you to clone and follow along as we go. Now, when I think of applications, I essentially think of a database interacting with a user interface via workflows. But the core concept of it, and I guess the building block, would be that database. And that's the reason that it's the first thing that we're going to cover off in this course. Now, creating and configuring a database in Bubble is very simple, and I'm going to be referring to 2 main things in this module, a data type and a data field. In our checklist here, we can see in bold here these headings, which are in fact the data types. And when thinking of a data type, I like to think of this as something that a user is creating. So for example, whenever a user signs up or registers to use our app, they are creating a user record, which is one of the data types. When they sign up, they will also be registering information to do with the company they work for. So they will be creating a company record as well. Once they've registered and they start using the app, they're going to be creating campaigns, recipients, and storing send records, which are all data types within our database. Now, underneath each data type, there are these checkboxes here, which are the individual items or the data fields, which will make up our database. This is essentially the information related to each of the data types or each of the things that a user will be creating or modified while they use our app. For example, for each user, we will be storing their name, their profile photo, and the company that they work for. For each company, we'll be storing that company name, the logo of the company, and so on. What you'll also see on this list are the types of data that each of these fields form within our database. So for example, a name will be in the format of text because it's a string of letters that makes up the user's name. A profile photo will be an image file. And there are a few other instances of us creating what is called a relational database. And this is where we relate multiple data types to each other using these data fields. For example, company, the data type will be of company, and that way we are organizing and linking our database in a relational fashion. I'll go through this in greater detail as we build out our database, but for now, the first thing that we're going to do is jump across into our Bubble editor and see how we're going to build our database. So I'm going to scroll across to my editor, and whenever you create a new app, this is what you'll be greeted with. This is essentially a blank canvas to build our app. At the moment, we are looking at the design tab,
As we build our UI, this is where we will do it in our design tab. When we build out our workflows to link our data and our user interface, we will be creating these in the workflow tab. But for now, we are going to be creating our database in this data tab here. Now, when we click on this screen, we essentially see two sections. There is the data type section on the left and the data field section on the right. Now, by default, Bubble always creates a user data type whenever a new app is created with these built-in fields such as the email of the user, the created date, the modified date, and the slug of the user. And the reason this is pre-built is because essentially whenever someone interacts with our app, we want the experience of that person to be unique to them. And to do that, we have to ensure that they first sign in to their user record, and then they are only displayed the database that is associated with their user record. Like I said, this data type and these fields are pre-built. However, Bubble makes it super simple for us to add our own data types and associated data fields according to how we want to build our database and our app. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create all the data types that I would like displayed in my database. So I'm going to scroll back across to my checklist and I'm going to see that I want to create a user, which is the people who log into our app, our company, so the associated company that user works for and all the information associated with that company. This is actually the central point of our database. We are going to link all our recipients and campaigns and sends to that company records. That's a very important data type to get right. We have our recipients, which are the people who are going to be receiving our emails and all the information associated with that recipient, such as their email address and their name, and then linking back to the company they are associated with. The campaigns that we are going to create have associated data fields such as the name, the subject line of the email campaign, a header image, the body copy, which will be stored as text, and then a status, which will be an option set, which I'll touch on shortly as well. And then lastly, very similar to a campaign, we have the send record, which is very similar, but will play a bit of a different role in our app. So let's get started in making these data types. So the user is already created. To create a new data type, simply head to this gray section on the left here, new type. We're going to give our company data type a name. Makes sense to call this data type company. I'm going to hit create. And then as you can see, we have these built-in fields already created and our data type name of company is up here. Let's go ahead and create our recipient data type. I'm going to hit create. I'm also going to create our campaigns data type. And then lastly, I'm going to create our send data type. Now what you'll notice that one of the fields that has been created is this creator user field. This is Bubble's way of linking each of the data fields back to our user record so that whenever a user logs in, they're only seeing the database that is associated with their user record. What we will be doing is actually linking the company record to all of our data types because we actually want that to be the central piece of our database, but we'll get to that shortly. Now heading back to our Notion checklist, let's take a look at each of the data fields within our data types. So this is essentially whenever we create a new thing, such as a new data type, such as a user, we want to ensure that we are also storing and saving bits of information that are appropriate to that thing or that data type as well. So let's scroll across and add these data fields. So underneath the user data type, I'm going to add these custom fields simply by clicking this create a new field button. Now, when we click this button, we are greeted with a pop-up that allows us to enter some information specific to this data type. First and foremost, we can give our field a name. So for this user's name field, I'm actually going to call it name. And then we have to choose the type of data that this field will be stored as. We can choose to save it as text or a date or a number or a file or an image or even an address. However, for this instance, we are just going to use text because that makes sense. We are also given the option to save this field as multiple values or multiple entries as a list. However, there's only going to be one name per user, so we are going to leave that unchecked. I'm going to choose to create that there, and you can see that the name of the field is here, followed by the field type, and then we get the option to add a default value, which we are going to save as blank for now. I'm then going to add the profile photo, and the way I'm going to write this is with a dash here. It's just a personal preference. I like to ensure that my data fields are just one string of characters without any spaces between, so I like to use a dash here. However, for the field type, we are going to choose, in this instance, an image, because we are going to allow the users to upload an image as the profile photo. There's only going to be one profile photo per user, so I'm going to go ahead and click create. Now what I'm actually going to do here is upload a default value for this field whenever the user record is created. The reason I want to do that is because when a user signs up, they're not going to straight away add their own profile photo. It might be a step that they do down the line, but we want to make sure that that field is filled out whenever this user record is created. So I'm going to choose a default photo to upload here. Now the good news is that I already have an option for this for you. In a Google Drive link, which I'll make available in this course, I actually have this user photo already saved so that whenever our user creates a new user record, we'll make sure that this is the user photo or avatar or kind of blank user that is uploaded and stored against these user records. So let's scroll back across, and I'm going to upload that default image here. So the image has been uploaded and is set as the default for this field. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add a field for the company. Now, like I said, we are storing this as a relational field in our database. So to do this, we have to do it a little bit different. We won't be storing this company field as text or image or a number or anything of the like. We're actually going to choose to link it to the existing data type of company. That just means that we are linking these two data types together, and that forms that relational hierarchical relationship that we'd like to do within our database. It's a really cool feature of Bubble. Not many other builders have this capability, but it just makes sure that our database is nice and organized and all linked in a nice way. So let's go ahead and click create. And as you can see, we have successfully created all the fields within our user data type. I'm going to scroll back across to Notion, and I'm going to check all of these boxes to say that is complete. Next is our company data type. So heading across again to our Bubble editor, I'm going to head to company, and I'm going to get started on creating these new fields. First, we're going to give our company a name similar to our user. This is just going to be a text field. There's only going to be one name per company, so I'm going to hit create there. I'm also wanting our users to be able to upload their company logo, so let's call this logo. Similarly, this will be an image file. I'm going to hit create, and similar to the profile photo in the user record, I'm going to select a default image, which will be the company or the business building logo that we see here as the default. So let me upload that. Next, I'm going to add a default email header. Now, the reason I want to do this is because I want to give our users an option to save an email header that is going to be consistent across their email campaigns whenever they create them, so that they don't have to upload an image to the top of their email every single time they create a new campaign. This is going to be something that's branded and stored and saved against the company record so that it just saves some time for the user. Let's go default email header. This is going to be an image file. There's only going to be one email header per company, so let's hit create there. Now, as I mentioned, the company data type is going to be the central part of our database. And the reason we're going to do that is because let's say we have multiple users signed into that company. We want to make sure that each of those users are able to see the recipients and the campaigns and the sends that are associated with that company. There's only going to be one central company in our database that has all these relationships, including the user. So let's create those relational fields here. We're going to say recipients, and the field type will be the recipient data type. However, in this instance, a company is going to be related to multiple recipients. So here I am going to click this, make this field a list section here. Let's hit create. And you can see that the field type is list of recipients. So if you can imagine in our database, there's going to be the company and all the list of recipients that are associated with that company. I'm going to also do the same for campaigns. There is going to be multiple campaigns per company. So I'm going to hit campaign. I'm going to select this multiple entries checkbox. And lastly, I'm going to do the same for sends. There's going to be multiple sends per company. So let's create that there. Back across to our Notion checklist, we have completed the creation of all these fields underneath the company data type. And next is recipient. So let's scroll back across. We are going to head to the recipient data type. And essentially what we are creating here is a CRM of all our customers or prospects or whoever we want to receive emails. Now it is worth noting that the information that we are storing against these recipients is considered PII, which is personally identifiable information. So we want to make sure that we are keeping our app secure so that this information doesn't fall into the wrong hands, which there have been data breaches where this has been an issue. So it's really important that we make sure that our app is secure so that this information is kept safe. In this same vein, we only want to store relevant information of our recipients because it is so sensitive. So let's only store the required information that will make our app functional. We are going to add the name of our recipients, which will be a text field. They're only going to have one name per recipient. And we are going to add the email address of the recipient as well, which will also be a text field. One email per recipient. I'm going to hit create. Now we're going to link this back to our company. So to do that, I'm going to have the field name as company, and I'm going to relate it to the company data type. There's only going to be one company per recipient, so let's hit create. Back in our Notion checklist, we can check that we've checked off all of these data fields. I'm going to scroll down and look at the next data type, which is campaign. So let's head to the campaign data type. The first thing I'm going to do is link it to the company in the same relational vein that we have done the other data sets. There's going to be one company per campaign, so let's hit create. Now, this is where we can start to see our email builder come to life, because against the campaign is where we'll be storing our subject line, our email header, and our body copy. Now, this is what the user is going to customize and personalize for their emails before they send it out to their recipients. So we want to make sure that whenever a user creates a new campaign, whether it be a monthly campaign or a promotional campaign or anything of the like, you might be familiar with campaigns if you've dealt with Mailchimp or ActiveCampaign or one of those other email builder tools in the past. We essentially want to make it so that the user can customize each subject line or email header and the body copy of this campaign so that it's specific to what they want to send out and communicate to their recipients. So let's add a subject line field here. We're going to add this as text, and we're going to hit create. We are going to add a header. We're going to add an email header, which is the header image of our email. This will be an image file. And I'm going to also have body, which is the body text of our email when we can input our message and input the majority of what we want to say to our recipients. Whenever we create a campaign, we also want to give it a name. So let's create a name field. I understand that there are a lot of name fields within our different data types, but that's okay. We'll be able to distinguish them enough when we use them in our UI and in our workflows. That's fine. Let's hit create. And heading back to our Notion checklist, we can see that we've covered off these 5 data types, but there is one more that is a little bit different, which needs a bit of explanation. So all of the data types that we have created so far, we have given the users the power to create and input whatever they want into that. They can write their own text, they can upload their own images, they can do majority of the work, and they can make those choices. However, there are some instances where we want to have a preset list of options for the user to choose from. And in this case, that is referred to as an option set. Now, for the campaign, there are only really 2 statuses they can be in. And as we scroll down, we can see that those 2 statuses are draft, which means that the build of the campaign is in progress, or sent, meaning that the distribution of this campaign has occurred to our recipients. So that campaign is marked as sent. So how do we create this as an option set in Bubble? So heading back over to Bubble, what we are going to do is head to this tab called option sets up here. Now we can choose to see how option sets work as Bubble has explained them. However, I'm just going to skip the tutorial because I'm going to explain that for you. Now, similar to how we've created new data types, we can choose to create a new option set just by giving it a name here, which we will call status. I'm going to create this, and here we can see something very similar to the data types, but on the right here, we have where we can add in our 2 options. So here, all I'm going to do is go down to this gray box. I'm going to give one of the options a name of draft, because we are going to say that it is in the status of draft, or it is in the status of sent. So we created our two options there. And what we'll be able to see here is that these options are displayed as text. There are different ways to display attributes in Bubble, but we're just going to leave it as text for now. Now, how are we going to give the users the option to use this option set rather than create their own text field in our database? The way we're going to do that is head back to our data types. In our campaign, we're going to create a new field called status. And underneath this field type section, we can see this status option set choice here, which we will select and then hit create. Our status is added here, and we can see here that there are only two options to choose from. Now, for our database entry, whenever someone creates a new campaign, we are going to want it by default to be set to the status of draft. Now we are going to create an automation or a workflow later in this course so that whenever a campaign is distributed or sent to recipients, the status of that particular campaign is moved to the status of sent. Option sets are a really cool feature of Bubble. However, we will only be using it in this instance, and I'll mark that off as done in our Notion checklist. I'm also going to check that we have completed the creation of the status option set, and the two choices are draft and sent. Now, the last data type that I will need to create fields for is this send data type. So we're going to head back into Bubble. I'm going to head to the send data type, and then I'm going to create new fields, very similar to what we've done for the campaign. We are going to give it a name, which will be a text field. We are going to create an email header, which is an image. We're going to give our email some body text, which is like this. Create. I'm also going to save the subject line. So as you can see, we can add multiple fields very quickly to our data type. I'm going to create. I'm also going to link this data type to our company in that relational sense. So we're going to choose the data type of company. Now, lastly, we are going to want to have a record of every email send and who it was sent to. So we are going to want to link our sends to our recipients. Now, to do that, we are going to create a new field, which is a similar relational field that we have created a few times now. We're going to create recipients. We are going to link this to the recipient data type, and each send will be sent to a number of recipients. So this is also going to be a list. We're going to hit create. Now, this is a cool bi-directional bit of UI magic here, what we're doing. On each send, it'll display a list of all the recipients, but then on each recipient, it'll have an associated list of sends or emails that the recipient has received over their lifetime of being a recipient in our app. So let's wrap this all up, and heading back to our checklist, I'm going to select that we have created all these data fields underneath the send data type. Now, as we can scroll across, we can see that our database has been built, but there is one final thing I want to touch on, and that is these privacy rules that you see on the left here. So as we've built out each of these data types, by default, Bubble sets them as publicly visible, except for the user record. If we go to the user record and click this privacy rules applied, now this is a privacy rule set by default by Bubble. And essentially what this is saying is that each user can only see the data that they have created. Now, because we have the company as the central data point for our database, and we might be able to have multiple users per company, we don't want this to be the case. We want each user to be able to see the information that is associated with their company, even if it has been created by another user. Even if another user has created a campaign or a recipient, we want that to be visible. So we are going to delete this privacy rule, and we are instead going to move this feature or this privacy function into the UI of our application, which I'll show you how to do in a few modules time.
Throughout the next module, I'm going to teach you exactly how you can register new user accounts inside of your app. So that way, of course, people can sign up and use your email builder. Now that we've taken the time to build and configure our custom database for our email builder app, the next thing that we're going to do is start to build some of the user-facing features within our email builder Bubble app. So taking a look at our Notion checklist, if I scroll down, I can start to see all the list of features that we're going to be building over the next few modules. As you can see, there is a lot to get through. However, I'm going to walk through these slowly so that you can follow along and start to build some of these features step by step so that we can create that amazing user experience that we planned within our email builder app. Now, as you can see, the very first thing that we're going to do is build a function to allow a new user to register an account within our email builder app and the workflows and the processes that we're going to have to configure in order to make that a reality. Now, as you can see, there are a few things to go through. We're going to have to create the initial page. We're going to have to build functionality to allow a user to create a secure password. We are then going to, once they register accounts, sign them up with their company and their account information. We then want to store those account details within our database. And then whenever a user actually creates their account, we are going to build them functionality to redirect their experience to the settings page whenever they create it so they can make adjustments or get started on their journey using our email builder app. Now, while this does seem like a lot, we are going to walk through these slowly, but in this module, we are also going to cover off a lot of the basics in the Bubble editor, such as responsive design, container layouts, styles, and a whole lot more. So this is a very great module to get us started. But before we get started, let me scroll across and I'm going to open my design tab, but I'm actually going to jump across one more screen because I want to show you an example of what we will be building and the user registration functionality that we will hopefully achieve by the end of this module. So as you can see, I have a page heading here that is nice and centered within the page and spaced from the top of the browser interface here. We then have a box where we have some fields such as a place for the user to register their name, their email address, and then their company name. And then once they enter those details, they'll be able to hit this register button, which will actually bring up a pop-up. Now, this is a very important part of our email builder app. And the reason I say that is because we are storing the information to do with our recipients, such as their name and their email address, we are wanting to make sure that we keep this secure. And the reason we're going to do that is because in our email builder app, we're going to be storing some pretty sensitive information, such as a recipient's name and their email address. So to ensure that the app that we create for our users or that we let our users create for themselves, to ensure that is secure, we are enforcing that they have to create a strong password so that their accounts cannot be hacked or by some malicious intent gone into and that information is stolen and given to a third party. It's just stuff that we don't want to be at risk of. So to do that, we're going to build functionality to enforce that our user creates a strong password whenever they create our account. Once they do set that password, they're going to hit this create account button. That is going to trigger some workflows in the back end that is going to create their account or create their user login in our database. And then that is going to then, like I said, redirect to the settings page so that they can get started in using our app. So as you can see, there is a fair bit to get through, but like I said, we're going to go through it slowly. And heading back to my Bubble editor, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my new page. As you can see in the top left here, we're currently on the index page, which is essentially the home page or the dashboard of our Bubble app. And in most cases, whenever someone logs in, this is the first page that they're going to see. However, if someone has not yet created an account for our app, they are going to be redirected to the registration page so that they can enter their details and create their account. So how do we create a new page? To do that, let's click this drop down on the top left. And here we are given a few options of pre-built pages that are created by Bubble. However, we are going to get started by adding a new page. We're going to give that page a name. I'm just going to call this register. We are given the option to clone this new page from an existing page, which we might do a little bit further down the line. However, I'm going to select to keep this blank, which is going to create a brand new page from scratch. And to do that, I'm going to hit create. Cool. So as you can see, we now have a new page that is called register. Our blank space here is of the register page you can see. And so let's get started on building some of the elements and the layout of this registration page. So the best way to get started in creating our page or a unique experience within our page is to actually double click this white space and bring up this gray box on the right, which is called our property editor. Now, whenever we want to make edits to a page or an element,
The way that we're going to do that is by clicking on that page or that element and bringing up our property editor, which is where we can make tweaks to things like the styles and the spacing and the alignment and a lot of other things which we'll go through throughout this course, which will then reflect on the blank space or the canvas that we can see here. Now, whenever we create a new page, the very first thing that we are going to do is head to this layout section here, and we are going to select a container layout that suits our use case. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth is a container layout? Well, to explain that, let me use a few examples. As you can see, our current container layout is fixed. Now, what does that mean? If I go to the left of my page here and I select some visual elements and drag them onto my page, let's say, for example, a button, as you can see, I'm simply dragging this and dropping this into a fixed location. If I then drag another element, it is going to be fixed in that location, which I drop it. Now, while this may seem nice and flexible and easy to edit, it's not going to be responsive. And responsive design is very critical whenever we are creating an app. And the reason that is because our users will often visit our app from a different device or a different window size or a different browser type, which will edit the user experience or will edit the way that our elements are stacked on our page. So while the two buttons on our page for now might look great because it's on a desktop size, which is nice and wide, on a mobile, it would skew and it wouldn't look very good at all. So if I click on my white space again and head back to my layout tab, there are only ever one of two options that we will ever choose when creating an app or when creating a group of elements within our editor here. And they are either the row or the column. Now, whenever thinking about these layouts, it's real simple to tell the difference between the two. A row is when we are going to stack our elements horizontally on our page, like a row of a spreadsheet or something like that. And a column is when we are going to stack them vertically, like a column in a spreadsheet in the similar fashion. So when I click the row option as the container layout for this page, let's take a look at what happens to the two existing elements on this page. So as you can see, they are stacked side by side horizontally on our page because we have chosen to display our elements in a row fashion. If I were to then go and change that to be the column layout, as I can imagine that you will be able to guess, they are stacked vertically or in that column fashion. Now, as a rule of thumb, whenever I create a new page, I will always choose the column layout because, as you'd know from visiting a lot of apps or websites in the current day and age, a lot of these are built from top to bottom. You'll have the header and then a hero section, or you'll have a title and then some copy, and then you'll have some buttons. I always say that the column layout is the best way to build. You can then create groups that are rows or something a bit different like that. But as the overall page layout, we're going to pick a column in this instance. There is more we're going to walk through in the next few minutes to do with things like margins and how to adjust the layout of different elements on our page as the page width grows and shrinks. But there is one thing I quickly wanted to touch on before moving on, and that is the color of my buttons that you might notice here. Now, whenever you create a new Bubble app, a lot of the time the colors by standard would be blue. You'd see some blue apps. But in this instance, I have adjusted the site styles with a particular color scheme and a particular font that will be standard across my app throughout every page or experience that I build. Now, how have I done this? If we head to the left of our page here and click on this paintbrush icon, we see the styles of our site. And here, if we go to style variables, we can make edits to what are called the global styles of our application. Now, the two main things that I'm going to talk about are our default fonts. So as you can see, the default font that I have currently set is of Arial. But if I were to click this drop down, I could pick another font, let's say Lato or Lato. If I then head back to my design tab, you'll see that by default, the font of these buttons have changed to Lato. If I head back to the design tab and I change that back to Arial, it will then reflect across my entire app as I continue on with my build. Same goes for the colors. I have set the primary color for my app to be this nice golden yellow, which is the color code FAB515. Now, what this essentially means is that whenever I create a new button or a title or anything where this primary color will be generated, this will just be uploaded by default, which is a really nice quick way to keep the style of your site consistent. However, if let's say down the line I wanted to change this default style to be a nice red color,
I could change that FA1414. If I then go back to my design tab, these buttons will be red. So these global styles are just a nice quick way to make sure that the styling of your site is consistent, but also a nice quick way to edit it as you go along in your building journey if you needed to. So I'm going to change this back to my nice FAB515 color here, this nice yellow, and it's Arial, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to see that my buttons are the styles that I prefer. So now that I've covered that off, let's get started on actually building our registration page experience. Let me get rid of these buttons. And as you recall, the first thing that we can see at the top of our page will be the title of this registration page. So how do we add that? As this is a simple text element, to add that to my page, all I'm going to do is scroll to the left and drag this text element onto our page here. Now, as you can see, it's automatically dragged to the top left-hand side of the page, but I can edit this with ease in my property editor here. Before I edit the size and style, let me go to my layout tab, and there are a few things that I'm going to touch on which are pretty critical and will flow on to the rest of our app. So I just want to take the time to go through these slowly. The first thing I'm going to adjust is the alignment or the horizontal alignment of my text element within my column container layout. I can choose to either align it to the left of the page, choose the center of the page, or to the right of the page by scrolling through these options here. I'm wanting to keep this in the center of my page, so I'm going to choose this centered alignment option just by clicking this button here. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the width of my text element. Now I'm given a few options here. The text element itself will change as I adjust the string of letters within my text element, but the box that you can see around it here is what I can edit using these width and height adjustments here. So I can have two options. I can choose to make this element a fixed width, which means that if I were to set this to be, let's say, 100 pixels, no matter what browser or experience the user was using when I visited this registration page, this text element would always be a width of 100 pixels. Now, this isn't going to be the option that I will choose, and I'll show you why. If I head back to my appearance tab and I actually edit this text, and let's just say, let's actually enter our header of our app here. Let's go email echidna. As you can see in this example, not the best use case because email echidna actually fits within that 100 pixels. But let's say if I were to write registration page for email echidna, you can see that it doesn't scale or it doesn't change in width because we've set that fixed width. Now the option that we will choose to go with is to not choose it to be a fixed width. So we'll leave that box empty. And here is where we can start to understand better our responsive design concept. If I make the minimum width to be 0 and the max width to be infinite, what essentially is going to happen here is this is our responsive design in action. Let me show you what I mean. If I head across to this responsive tab next to my UI builder section, this is where I can start to test and play around with what my experience will look like on different devices. So as you can see, if I choose this 1200 pixel wide option, this gives me a preview of what my app will look like on a 1200 pixel wide monitor of a desktop. If I choose 992, this is a tablet. If I choose 768, this is a smaller tablet. And if I choose 320, this is a mobile device. Now let's see what happens if, for whatever reason, or it's not going to happen in reality, but let's see what happens if the user visits on a device that is less than 320 pixels. As we shrink down our page, we can see that our text box actually shrinks with the page. So if we go to our layout tab, we can see because we have set the minimum width of 0, that means that we are creating a responsive experience because as the page width shrinks, our text box will shrink with it. As our text box grows, if I were to uncheck this fit with the content box, as we see that our page width grows, the element will grow with it. Now this is going to be the standard that we are going to add for pretty much every group or every text element that we are going to create. But essentially the reason that we're doing the rule of thumb of setting the minimum width of 0 and the max width of infinite is so that our elements or our, the elements within our page or within our group are going to be responsive and create a good experience regardless of what device our users visit our email builder app on.
Now, I will just, while I'm here, briefly mention the same sort of thing occurs for the fixed height. However, because we are only really talking about the width of a page during this responsive discussion, we don't really need to touch on the height requirements or the rules of thumb because it doesn't really apply. However, here we can play around with whether we want to make the height of this text box or element specific. So you might want to do this for a button. You might want to say, I want to keep the height to be, let's say 60 pixels, or it might be 40, or something of the kind. You can also set minimum widths to make sure that, as, let's say, for example, the text within this text box grows, the text box itself grows with it, so no text is cut off. But you can play around with this, and we probably will as we go on, but I just wanted to briefly touch on that. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about was this margins and padding. Let's go back to the default size of our page. And I'm going to go back to my UI Builder section because I want to talk about how we are going to fix our text box inside of our column container layout without resorting to the fixed location option. So what we can do using this margin section here is add space to either the top of our page, the bottom of our page, the left of the page, or the right of the page. And that's what you can see here with these pixel values at this section that I'm pointing at right now. If we wanted to add 100 pixels of space of our text box from where it currently is located to the top of the page, I would choose to add a margin at the top, let's say of 100 pixels. Now, as we can see, what that does is it inserts a spacing of 100 pixels or a margin of 100 pixels from the top of our page. I can do the same with the left of my page. Let's go 50 pixels and 50 pixels to the right of the page. And what you can see is we have positioned our element within our column layout, which is essentially what we wanted to do. A slight difference that I'll touch on briefly is padding. So as you can see, the margins are spacing on the outside of our text box. However, padding is spacing on the inside of our text box. We might use these when we're playing around with buttons or maybe groups of elements or something of the like. But let's say, for example, I wanted to add padding of 50 pixels at the top. You can see that that gray space is where we are adding padding. We're not going to talk about this too much because we're not going to use it that often in the build of our email builder app. However, I just wanted to explain the difference between margin and padding. The last thing that I briefly want to talk about is heading back to our appearance tab, is where we can then adjust the individual style of our element, or in this case, our text element within our page. Now, if we wanted to set some consistencies with, let's say, the heading size and color of each heading element within our text element within the larger scheme of our app, we could do this by editing the style of each of these options that we have to choose from when it comes to our text elements. However, let's just address this on a case-by-case basis. What I'm going to do is remove the style or the, consistencies of this text element, and let's build this custom in this case. So to do that, we can choose a size by adjusting the size of our text element here, choosing a value. Let's choose 36 pixels. We can also choose a weight. So this is how thick our text is. We can choose something that's regular or light by choosing these values. I'm going to leave it at 700 because I like it to be nice and bold. I can choose an alignment within my text box. So on the layout tab, we chose how our element is going to be spaced on our page. But in this instance, this is where our text is aligned in our text box. So I'm going to choose to center that text so that it's nice and down the middle of our page. And then lastly, the color. Now, because I set that yellow global style, it's an easy way to add that just by selecting this value here, which, as you can see, it generates my FAB 515 primary color code just there. So let's choose that. I'm going to head back up and I'm going to edit this text to display what I wanted it to, which is just the name of our application, which is Email Echidna. Now, I know we covered a lot there, and there's still a little bit of, rule of thumb or best practices that I wanted to cover when we're talking about groups. So please stick with me, but we are going to create this experience slowly just so that you understand and create a bit of a baseline in your knowledge when building Bubble apps. So the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to create that group of fields where the user is going to input their name, their email address, and their company name. So to do that, let's head over to the left, and rather than choosing individual visual elements such as a text or a button or anything of the like, I'm going to choose to add a group container to my page. Now, when I think of group containers, I like to think of these as a page within a page. If I drag and drop this onto my page, it is going to add it below my heading because we have set the column layout. But now I can actually input individual visual elements within this group to sit in the larger scheme of my page. So what am I talking about here? Now that we have our group, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually choose to resize this group to create that page within a page experience of this registration page. So to do that, let's play around with some of these sizings for now. Now, because I want this to be responsive, I'm not going to choose the fixed width option. I'm going to choose the minimum width to be 0, and I'm not going to do this every time, but I'm going to select a maximum width of 450 pixels. Now, what this is going to do is it is going to shrink my group element to be 450 pixels wide, but I'm also going to space it in the center of my column container. I'm then going to leave these height elements as they are because I've selected this fit height to content option, which is basically just an easy way to say that whatever elements I then add inside my group container layout, the height of my element or my group will adjust with that. So what do I mean by that? If I were to add, let's say, a text element and then a button and then another text element, you can see that the height of this group would grow as I continue to build elements. So it just means that we can have everything nice and snugly within our group so that it looks nice and is a good experience for the user. Now I'm going to get rid of these elements, and I've just realized that this is kind of hard to make edits to because when we drag away our mouse, we can't really see it within our page. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, just for the time being, create a background for this group so that I can see it within the larger scale of my page. So to do that, I'm going to choose a flat color background style, and let's choose just like a nice light gray so that we can see it on our page. Now I'm also going to play around with the styling and the margins a little bit later, but first let's add our elements to our group container. So the first thing that we are going to add to this group of fields or group of inputs that our user will enter their name, email address, and company name is just a simple text box where it gives a hint of what the user is going to fill out, a bit of a title. So I'm going to write the word name. I'm not going to adjust the styles of this for the time being because I just want to create this experience first. Let me scroll down, and once I get past these visual elements and our containers, I get to my input form section of my bubble editor. Now this is where I can drag elements that are interactive or allow for the user to add inputs into this experience or this registration page. Now, these input forms are pre-built by Bubble, and they're actually really easy to use and really functional to create a cool experience for our app. And it makes our page interactive and empowers our workflows as we go along. There are just so many cool benefits of this. So I'm not going to say too much more. You'll see what I mean. So for my input here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give this input a name. Heading up to the top of our property editor, if I click this text section here, I can call this input name. And the reason I'm going to give these elements a name of name, is because when I start to use these in my workflows, I need to distinguish one element from another. I need to ensure that each, let's say for this name section, the input or the text that is put into this name input element is then stored to the correct section within my database. So I want to ensure that whatever is put in the name section gets put as the name, whatever is put in the email section is put in the email of my database. So it's really important to give particularly all of our inputs their own unique names. Now on our appearance tab, I can choose to edit the placeholder, which is the initial text that is displayed whenever the user arrives at this registration page, and having it as type here is fine. I could edit this to be type your name here, just to give some additional instructions, type your name here, but type here is fine, so let's just get rid of that. The next option of initial content is actually a pretty cool feature that we're going to address further down the line, so I'm not going to address that. Lastly, the content format is text. We're going to leave that as is as well. All of these things on the appearance tab are fine as they are. Let me go to the layout tab. Here, I'm going to not choose to keep this element as fixed width. I'm going to make it responsive so that it fits as wide as my group is. Let's say the minimum width is 0, just so that we have that nice rule of thumb and we're keeping everything consistent. Minimum width of 0, maximum width of infinite, so that if we head to our responsive tab, let me get rid of my property editor. If we shrink the size of our page, our elements will shrink with it and just create a nice experience. It is not going to, the text box got a bit small there, but as you can see, this is 200 pixels wide. We're not going to worry about that. That is fine. Let's move back to our default view and head back to our UI Builder section. Now, one thing that I am going to now adjust are the margins within my group. So as you can see, everything is fit nice and snug because we haven't set any margins for our elements. So for this name text box, let's add a margin so that it fits nicely around the border or outside of the border of our group element. Let's add a margin of 20 pixels on the top. Let's add a margin of 20 pixels on the left and 20 pixels on the right so that it sits a little bit off our the edges of our group. And I'm going to add 10 pixels of margin on the bottom. The reason I'm going to do that is just so that it creates a nice little bit of space between the title of this field and the field itself. Let's do the same for our input element. Let's click on it and I'm going to, just quickly, I'm going to leave the fixed height as 48 pixels because that looks nice and it allows the text to fit nice and snugly in there. You can see it's got some padding. I'm going to leave that default style because I think it looks nice. However, let's add 20 pixels of margin to the left and 20 of the right, just so that it sits nicely off the borders of my group. And I'm going to also add this time 20 pixels of margin to the bottom and none to the top because as we can see here, everything fits nice and looks pretty good within the larger space of our group element. If I quickly head to my responsive tab and I adjust the size of the page, the width of the page, everything still is nice and has some nice, I guess you'd call it, margins around our group. So now that I've created my first input field, let's go back to our UI builder and let's start to build out some of our other input fields for our user to complete their registration experience. Now, a quick shortcut that I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to, before I do that, let me just make this bold so that it stands out a little bit and we can see there's a heading. To do that, I'm just going to select this B for bold. Quick one that I'm going to do, hopefully you didn't mind me doing that after the fact, but now that I'm going to actually select both of these elements, I'm going to do that by hitting the Shift button on my keyboard. I'm going to then click Control C, or I could right click and click to copy these two elements. As you can see, I've selected the two elements here. Then I'm going to either hit Command V or Control V, whatever, if you're using Mac or Windows, or I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose to paste my two elements below the existing elements that I've already set. This is just a nice way to, instead of having to drag the text across or drag the elements across and re-input all of the values, it's just the way to keep it all consistent and a nice way to create multiple of these elements. A little bit of a shortcut there, but it's done nice and easily. But I'm now going to have to make some quick edits so that we're keeping it best practice and we're keeping it nice and easy to follow along with our build. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of this top margin for my text box. Let's get rid of this. Now, as you can see, this just makes our headings and our input fields fit nicely in relation to each other, stacked one on top of the other. I'm going to change this text to be email address so that the users know to enter their email address into this input field. And I'm also going to adjust the name of this input field to email address so that when I use it in my workflows or anything of the like, I know that this is the input field where the user is going to input their email address. Let's do this one more time. I'm going to select both of these elements. I'm going to hit Control C and Control V. As you can see, it's duplicated them and added them below our existing elements within our group. I'm going to do the same thing. I don't have to adjust the margin here because it fits nice and snug, it looks good. Let's change this heading to say company name, so that I'm instructing my users to enter the company name into this input field here. I'm also going to change the name of it so that once again, I can distinguish this input field from any other in my workflow tabs. So let's call this input company name. So now that I have my input fields and each of the headings set up nicely within this group element, let's remove our flat color background. But then this thing that I'm going to do is a bit of a cool little styling feature that I like to use. And you might see pretty consistently in a lot of apps that you see nowadays, like Uber and the like. They actually use shadows around elements to fit within the page. So to do this, you can actually do this very simply on Bubble. I'm going to click my group. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to choose to add a shadow to this element. Now let's see if I just choose the basic outset option that Bubble creates. It creates this cool shadow effect and looks like the group is actually sitting off the page, which I think looks really cool. I'm going to quickly adjust some of these numbers just so that I can make it a bit more personal to what I like to see. So I'm going to click on my group here, and these numbers are just something that I keep in the back of my mind, and we are going to actually use this pretty consistently across our app. The numbers that I'm going to use for the horizontal outset is 0, the vertical offset is 7, the blur radius is 30, and then the spread radius is -5. Now these are just some random numbers, but when you click away, it actually makes it look really cool. Now there is one more styling thing that I'm going to change, and that is, as you can see, it's essentially a square, this group here. However, let's add some corner radius to our group so that we can round our corners a little bit. To do that, border styles here, I can just simply choose to adjust the roundness number of our corner radiuses. Let's just choose 20. And now, as you can see, if I click away, it makes this cool rounded edge look that I think looks pretty cool. When you're building your app, you feel free to make any adjustments here or style it as you please. But here, I really like this and I want this to be consistent across my app, so I can do something pretty cool. If I click on my group here, what I can choose to do is under this style section, click this drop down, and I can create a new style. Now what this is going to do is that anytime I choose to add a group element across the rest of my app experience, which I will be doing, I can choose to mimic this style and this look for all of my groups or for any group that I choose. So let's create a new style and let's call it shadowed rounded group. And then I'll hit create. Now to show what I mean, let me click away and I'm just going to add another group here. This is the standard plain group that Bubble's going to add. However, if I adjust my style to choose my shadow rounded group option, you can see that is added the corners or the rounded edges, and it has added that shadow that I think looks really cool. Getting rid of this, one last thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little bit of margin between my heading and my group. Let's go 20 pixels of margin to the top. While I'm here, I might also just add, let's go 20 pixels of margin to the left and 20 to the right, just in case that someone is visiting our page from a mobile device. We still have that rounded edge and that shadow style that you can see, and the box or the container isn't snug right against the edges of the device. So heading back to my UI builder, I'm pretty happy with this container group and the fields that are inside it. Now I can move on to adding my button, which will then trigger the pop-up for the user to enter their password. So to do that, let's head across to our button element here, the visual element. I'm going to drag this onto my page. And as you can see, because I've already set my style, the yellow effect and the right font has been chosen for this button. Let's go to my layout tab. I'm going to choose to center this in the horizontal alignment of my page so that it fits nicely snug there. I'm going to choose to add, let's go with 20 pixels of margin to the top. I'm going to add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom because this will be the last element on our page. So we want to make sure that there is some spacing between the bottom of our page and the bottom of this element. And just for best practice, let's go 20 pixels of margin to the left and 20 to the right. Now I'm happy with the size of this element, so I'm going to choose to leave it as 150 pixels width and 44 pixels height. That is fine by me. Let's head back to our appearance tab, and I'm going to change this label to be register. just to give our users a bit of an insight into what is going to happen when they click it. It is going to trigger the workflow to register their account. They do still have to set a password, but we're not telling them that just yet. So let's choose to label this one register. The name of our button has already been adjusted automatically, so we don't have to do anything there. And here we can see a completed at least interface or look of our registration page for the time being. However, there's still a little few things that we are going to add to our page to create this full experience. Now, before we jump into what that is, I'm going to select to see a preview of this page just to see what it'll look like if it were to be live in a browser. So as it's loading, you can see whenever it loads in my browser, it looks really nice and it looks exactly how it's essentially been set in the Bubble editor. I can choose to add in my name. Let's just go test name. Email address is test@email.com and my company name is test company. However, when I click this register button, nothing happens. And that's because we haven't set any workflows to trigger whenever this button is clicked or something else happens. But in this instance, we're going to need to add a workflow so that whenever this button is clicked, it brings up our pop-up for the user to set a password. So let's tackle that. I'm going to head back to my Bubble editor. Let me just add the pop-up element to my page. I'm going to go to the container section on the left and I'm going to drag the pop-up container here. And as you can see, my pop-up element has been added and it's already input that nice sort of opaque dark color in the background to gray out the rest of my page so that whenever this is seen on my page or whatever browser it is, this is the focus. Now I'm going to give my pop-up a name, which would be set password, just so that I can distinguish that in my workflows. And before I go ahead and start to actually build out this pop-up, the elements that are within this pop-up, I'm actually going to build the experience of triggering to show this pop-up whenever the registration button is clicked. And to do that, I want to introduce you to the workflow tab of my Bubble editor. Now, in another world, this would take a fair bit of code to actually make this experience possible. However, Bubble makes this super simple. All I have to do is either choose to click this button here to add an event, which is going to trigger my workflow, or I can actually head back to my Bubble editor, click on my button, and I can choose to add a workflow whenever this element is clicked. Let me do it that way. Let me select this add workflow button, which is essentially saying whenever the registration button is clicked, which you can see here, when button register is clicked, I can choose an action that I want my Bubble app to take. In this instance, I want to show the pop-up element that I've just created. So all I have to do here is to choose to add an action, and I'm given a lot of options here, things to change on the user's account, navigation to go to a certain page, to create or change a thing in my database, to send an email or something of the like. But here I'm just going to drag my head out of the way, and I'm going to choose this element actions section. And here I'm given a few options. I'm going to choose to show an element, which is my pop-up set passwords element. So like I said, super simple. In essence, whenever our button register is clicked, we are going to show the set password pop-up. Now let's go ahead and start to actually build out our pop-up so that we can complete this experience. To find my pop-up, I'm just going to scroll up here and I'm going to choose this overlays pop-up section here. As you can see, it's currently hidden so that we can focus on these elements whenever we start to make adjustments to our page. However, if I choose this eyelash looking icon, I can choose to show that. As you can see, it turns into an eye and it brings up this element so that we can make edits with ease. So first, I'm going to just quickly adjust the size of my pop-up here. Let's choose to, before that, we're going to choose to make this a column layout so that any elements that we add to this pop-up are going to be stacked from top to bottom. I'm going to make this a fixed width of, let's go 400 pixels. And the fixed height, I don't have to worry about because similar to what we were doing earlier, as we start to build out some of our elements and add them to this group, to this pop-up, it'll adjust the size accordingly. So first things first, let's give call it a title for this pop-up. We're going to just simply say we are instructing the user to set a password. Let's make this slightly larger text. We'll go 24 pixels, we are going to also make it a little bit larger. I can choose either bold, or I can choose to make it 700 in weight here. I'm going to head to my layout section, and I'm going to choose to center this text element in my column container. I'm going to choose to add, let's go 20 pixels of margin to the top, 20 to the left, and 20 to the right. And I'm happy to leave the width as it is and the fit width to content section ticked, just so that my text box is aligned to whatever the text is within its contents. Now, before I go into the next few sections, just to fully nearly complete it all, I want to quickly talk about app security. Now, like I said, because we are storing some sensitive information of our users, we want to ensure that whenever someone registers an account, they set a strong password. Now, this is really easy to enforce in Bubble, and to do that, let's head across to our settings tab. By clicking the general button here, I can choose to have a certain policy to do with my passwords that a user will create or adhere to whenever they create a login. So I am going to set a password policy, and I'm going to choose these criteria to enforce a certain minimum standard of security for my passwords. Let's go a minimum of 7 characters. Let's say, yes, I want to require a number and a capital letter, and best practice nowadays, passwords are very important. Let's go an a non-alphanumeric character as well. Now, I'm going to head back to my design tab, and I'm actually going to instruct my users that they have to abide by this. So let's add another text element. I'm going to simply say here, please set a password that is a minimum of 7 characters and contains a capital letter, a number, and a non-alphanumeric character. And I'm just going to explain what an alphanumeric character is. Let's go an @ a hash, a $, a percentage, and an ampersand. This way, we're instructing our users that you have to set a very secure password to use our app because we want to make sure it's very secure. Now, I'm going to just make a few adjustments. I'm going to center align my text within the text box. I'm also going to center align the text box itself within my column pop-up container layout. I'm going to choose to leave it as minimum width of 0, maximum width of 100, fit width to content, fit height to content, yes. And I'm going to choose to add 10 pixels of margin to the top this time. I'm going to go 20 to the left and 20 to the right. And as you can see, we've given our pop-up a heading and some nice instruction to make it as clear as for our users when they are setting a password. Now, I'm going to add an input field, an input element, so that the user can actually enter their password. I'm going to make some quick adjustments. I'm going to rename this input password. I'm going to leave all these sections here. I'm going to head to my layout tab. I'm going to choose to uncheck this box here, putting a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of infinite. I'm going to leave the fixed height as 48 pixels, and I'm going to choose to add a margin of 10 pixels to the top, 20 pixels to the left, and 20 to the right, so that it fits nice and snug within our pop-up section here. Lastly, I'm going to add a button so that this actually triggers our workflow to actually create the user account. The registration button wasn't quite what we said it was. However, if I add this button here, I'm going to set the label as set password so that the user knows that whenever they click this button, they are in fact setting the password for their account. I'm going to head to my layout tab, leave it as the width and height as it is. I like that. I'm going to choose to center align it. I'm going to choose to add 20 pixels of margin to the top, 20 to the bottom, 20 to the left, and 20 to the right. While I'm here, I'm going to click my pop-up group here, and I'm actually going to remove this minimum height to be 0 so that we are adhering to this fit height to content checkbox here, and we are setting the height of our content to be whatever the combination of heights that we have for each of our elements, just to make it all look nice and snug there. So we've built our pop-up element. Now let's build the workflow to actually allow a user to register their new account with their secure password. So we're going to do this the same way we did before. Let's click this set password button. Now under our appearance tab, I'm going to choose to add the workflow whenever this element is clicked. And if I do that, it creates me a new workflow section here, and I can choose to add actions to basically trigger whenever this set password button is clicked. I'm going to choose to add an action. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to add some actions for this user's account. Nice and simple, we are going to choose to sign this user up. Now here is where we set the login credentials for our user. Essentially, the email that they input into this email input field here is what will be the email address for their login. Let's head back to our workflow. And to do that, I'm going to select that. I am going to say whatever value is in input email address. Here you can see this is why we have labeled our input fields, but although I've misspelled address, sorry about that. Whatever value is within that email address input field is what our email address will be within our database and whatever the user's login is going to be. So it's very important to select this value section. Whatever the text value within that email address field is, that is going to be our user's email address. And their password similarly is going to be whatever value rather of text is within the email password, the input password field that you saw here. Now I can choose to require a password confirmation or send an email to confirm the user's email address or to remember their email. These are all built in and very usable with Bubble. However, I'm not going to cover that today because there is still a little bit more that we need to get through to complete this user sign up process. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to now make changes to the current user. And the reason I'm wanting to do that is because at this step 1 section, all we've done is assigned the current user their email address and a password. We are storing their email address into our database. However, we still need to create functionality to store their name and their company name into our database as well. So to do that, let's add another action. I'm going to choose to make changes to the current user being the user that was created in step 1. Current user, I'm going to choose to change the field of their name. Now, what will be changed in their name field? It is the value that is in the input name element, similar to what we've just done for the email. Nice and simple. We've assigned this name value to this email, to this user's email address, all within that same record. That's just one simple step to ensure that we're linking the two and we're ensuring that we are creating that user with the appropriate details. Now there is one complexity that I need to address, and that is because in our database, we have set the user record, their company to be of type company, not the actual company name. So what we have to do is we have to first create this company record and then assign it to the user with the right name that we have in that input field. A little bit confusing, but let me show you what we're going to do. We're going to head back to our workflow tab, and the third step that we are going to do is we're going to create a new thing. To do that, let's head to our data section here. We're going to create a new thing, and what we are doing is we are creating a new company. So let's click the company option here. I'm going to select the company name as the input, the value that is in the company name input on our registration page. Nice and simple to what we've done before. And now that we've created that company data type, or that company record, we need to link the two. We need to link our user to our company. And we're going to do that in step 4. A lot of steps here, but very important. Let's go to create a new action. I'm going to choose to make changes to the current user. I'm going to change the company that is associated. So just quickly, I'm just going to change their company according to their user record. Oops, jumping back to the workflow tab. The company to be the result of step 3's company. So essentially what this is doing is saying that in step 2 or in step 1 and 2, we've created a new user. In step 3, we've created the new company. And here we are making changes to this user to say that we are linking that to the company that was created in step 3. In step 3, we created that new company with the company name of what was in the registration section. We are essentially linking the two just by doing that here. This is a really cool function of Bubble, which has saved a lot of time and saved a lot of complexity, and we'll be using it a fair bit. It's just a way to make the workflow interactive and just create that nice user experience and just make it so much easier. The beauty of no code and the beauty of Bubble. Now, nearly complete. Once a user has been registered, what is going to happen? We are going to want to make sure that once they have completed that registration, they head to our settings page so that they can set their own profile picture and make any last minute adjustments. So we are going to add a navigation step at the end of our workflow here. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually have to create our settings page. So I'm going to quickly create this new page by clicking this drop down. Let's go add a new page. I'm going to create a settings page. We're going to create this from scratch, clone it from nothing. Let's go create. It's going to create me my settings page, but it's blank. I don't need to adjust it just yet. We're going to do that in the next few modules or the next module or two. I'm going to head back to my register page. I'm going to head to the workflow section. I'm going to choose this workflow that we have created to register our user. And last but not least, let's go navigation. I'm going to choose to go to page, and we are going to go to the settings page. So essentially what is going to happen in our experience, the user is going to be registered, and then once that is all complete, we are going to go to their settings page and they are going to be logged in, registered, and logged into their account. So, moment of truth. We've done all this work. Let's test it and see if this user is registered and set a secure password, and we are going to go to our settings page. So let's go to our preview app. I'm going to hit refresh and we are going to create a new user. Let me get my head out of the way. Let's call our user what we just had, test user. That is fine. Let's say test@email.com is their email address, and their company name is Test Company. Hopefully when I click this register tab, it is going to bring up my set password pop-up, and it has. Okay, I'm going to set a secure password with a capital letter, 7 characters minimum, a number, and a non-alphanumeric character. I'm going to say password 123 with an exclamation mark with a capital P. Don't do that. I'm just doing this for this example. I'll remember it. Password 123 with a capital with an exclamation point at the end. Let's hit set password. We are hopefully creating this new user account in our database, and it is redirected to our settings page. We are good so far. Let's go to our Bubble editor. Let's go to our data section, our app data, and see if it has worked. It has. Very good. I am very happy. We've created our new user called test user. The email address you can see there. The company is the unique ID of the new company that has been created. We've set the default profile picture there. Let's go to our company section. Hopefully it has also created a new company, which it has. Name of test company, the default logo, and very good, very great start to this course. Let's head across to our Notion checklist and just double check that we have covered everything off. Let's go here. We have created our registration page, set the password securely, signed the user up, created the new company. We are storing the user account details to our database, and we are redirecting to the settings page. Great start. Well done, everybody.
Following on from this module, the next section of our course is going to be like an extension of what we've just covered. Only in this case, we're going to learn how to create a user login feature.
Now that we've created our registration page and built the workflow to create a new user in our database, we're now going to build a page for a returning user to log into their existing account for our email builder app. Now, the building of this page will be very similar to the registration page we just built in the previous module. However, there are a few nuances which I'm going to touch on later in the module. But essentially, what I'd like to start off by doing is heading to another browser where I can show you a preview of something that I've already built to show the login functionality. So let me head across to this preview app that I've built. And essentially what we have is just the email and password of our user, which they will put into these fields and be able to log into this account using these secure credentials. So let me try to log in here using a pre-created account. And if I hit login, it should take me to the dashboard, which it has done. We do have a bit of a blank account here, but it just shows that it will take us to the dashboard when we input the right credentials. Now, if I hit back, there are some other features that I do want to show you that we will be building later in our login page build. The first being this link, which redirects the user to the registration page if they don't have an account just yet. And the next is an I forgot my password prompt, which is a flow which allows a user to input their email address, be sent an email with a link for them to reset their password, which actually might happen a bit more than we might think, particularly because we have set this complex password policy to keep our app secure. Now, this may sound like a lot, but I'm going to walk through this with you slowly, and we're going to make sure that this entire experience is seamless for our app. So back to our Bubble editor. The first thing that we are going to do is we are going to create a new page. Now, I could create a new page using the registration page as the clone, just to take a few shortcuts. However, I'm not going to do that. Let's create it from scratch just so that we can have practice at building new pages. I'm going to select to create my new page, and it is here. It is going to create my login page, which currently is a blank canvas. Now, similar steps to what we've just done with the registration page, I'm going to choose to create a container layout of a column. I'm then going to add a text element, which will be the title of this page. So let's just say email Echidna, capital E. I'm going to set it as a text size of 36 pixels. It is going to be 700 weight, so it is bold, and it's also going to be my yellow color. I'm then going to head to my layout tab. I'm going to center align it. I'm going to add 100 pixels of margin to the top, 20 to the left, and 20 to the right. Now, I did go through that quite fast, but this just shows that once you've been in Bubble enough and you've had some experience in building apps and building new pages, it can be that easy. Next, I'm going to add my shadowed group, which we created in the last module. Under the style, we are going to choose shadowed rounded group. Again, I'm going to head to my layout tab, and I'm going to choose it to be a minimum width of 450 pixels this time, and I'm going to center align it in my page. Heading to our layout tab, I'm going to choose to make this a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of, let's go 450 pixels this time. And I'm also going to center align it in my page. I'm then going to add 20 pixels of margin at the top, 20 at the left, and 20 at the right. And then I'm going to start to add my elements for the login part of my app. So again, quite similar to what we've done for the registration page, I'm going to add a text element first and foremost, which has the text of email, indicating that we are adding an input field where we want the user to input their email address that is associated with their account. First, I'm going to bold that text. I'm then going to add an input element, and I'm going to drag that into my group below that email text. I'm going to first name this input email. I'm then going to head to my layout tab. I'm going to remove the fixed width, give it a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of infinite. I can leave the height as it is. And here I'm going to add some margins just so that it fits nicely within my group. Let's go for the text box. Let's go 20 pixels of margin at the top, 20 at the left, 20 at the right. And we will do the same for this input. Let's go this time 10 pixels of margin at the top, 20 at the left, 20 to the right, and 20 to the bottom. Like I said, super easy once you get the hang of it. Let's do the same thing for the password. We're going to hit Control C and then go Control V. I'm going to remove the margin at the top so that it fits nice and snugly underneath. We're going to rename this password because this is where we're going to get the user to input their password. And then same goes for this password section. I'm going to rename this password. And a cool thing that Bubble does by default, when we set our workflow, we will indicate that this is our password field. So it'll actually hide the characters that I put into this field just to make sure that it is kept secure, which is a really cool built-in feature of Bubble. I'll show you that shortly, but now the next thing I'm going to do is add a button where I will allow the user to start their workflow to actually log into the app. Let's call this button Login. I'm going to add the label of login as well. Let's head to our layout tab. We will center align this. I'm happy with the width and height of this element. Let's go down to the margins. I'll go 20 pixels of margin at the top, 20 at the bottom, 20 at the left, and 20 to the right. Now let's head to our responsive section just to make sure that our app is fully responsive. If I shrink the page width, you can see that it is nice and responsive, and is still looks good regardless of the width or the size of the browser that the user is visiting our login page on. So nice and responsive there. We've started really well. Now it's time to create the workflow to allow a user to log in once they've entered their email and password. To do that, let's click this login button. I'm going to head to the Appearance tab and click Add Workflow. Now this login workflow is already pre-built into the workflow section. So all I'm going to do next to this account tab is select Log the User In. I have to set the fields that I want the email and password to be, which is input email's value. So the text value that is in that email field will be what Bubble uses as the email login credentials. And then the password is similarly input password's value. Now, a quick note here, we can see this stay logged in section, which essentially means that if a user logs into the app on, let's say, a Tuesday, if they visit the app again on a Wednesday, they will still be logged in. We can set that as no if we want to just add another layer of security. However, we're confident that our users are going to be secure on their device, and we won't need to add that additional complexity or that additional step because we set a strong password, and we're okay with that for now. The next thing I'm going to do in my workflow is to navigate the user to the index page. Now, we're not going to go to the settings page because this is the login section. They've already visited the app and hopefully set it up how they would like their profile picture and company logo and the like to be. So we're going to redirect them to the index page. Let's head to the navigation section and we are going to choose the next action in our workflow to be go to page, and the destination will be index. So super simple to build. Let's quickly test it to make sure that it is all functioning how we want it to. Let's go to our preview. So I hit preview and we are greeted with our login page that we have just created. Let me log in using the credentials of the user that I built in the last registration module. Let's go test@email.com. Password 123 with an exclamation point. It has a capital letter, a non-alphanumeric character being the exclamation point, and a few numbers, and it's greater than 7 characters. Let's hit login, and as we can see, it logs in our account and it goes to the index page. We can see up here that there's nothing after this version test / so we know this is our index page and our home page or our dashboard. So we're happy that our login functionality has been built. But we're not finished just yet. Like I said, we're going to cater for a few different scenarios of someone landing on our login page. The first being if they currently don't have an account registered with our email builder app. So to do that, let's add a text element underneath our button. First of all, we will center align it, and I'm going to replace the copy to say, I don't have an account yet. And then I'm going to say register here. Now, there is a little bit of styling that I want to add to this bit of text. And to do that, I can head to the rich text editor part of my text element. This is a really cool part of Bubble where you can add some style to individual characters or individual sentences within a greater text box. So let's do that by clicking this rich text editor. I'm going to choose to bold and underline this bit of copy that says register here. To do that, I'm going to simply hit this B and this underline part. And now if I click save, it actually adds some code into the text box here, which is just a nice quick way and an easily no code friendly way to do it on our Bubble app. The next thing I'm going to do is add a workflow so that when a user clicks this text element, it actually directs them to our registration page. Super simple. All I'm going to do there is click add workflow. I'm going to click here to add an action, go to our navigation section, and I'm going to go to page, and the page that I'm going to go to is register. Super simple and just a nice way to cater to another scenario of someone landing on our login page. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is build the workflow or the functionality for someone who has forgot their password. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to head back to our design tab, and I'm going to add another text element, which will be the start of the workflow for someone who has forgot their password. So let's say this text box is I forgot my password. I'm not going to add any styling to this. I'm just simply going to center align it. I'm going to add 20 pixels of margin to the top just so it's a little bit separate. And I'm going to also add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom as it is the last element in my column layout. So to start our workflow, I'm going to click on this text element again, go to my Appearance tab and select Add Workflow. Now, similar to what we've just done for the I don't have an account text box, we're going to select Navigation and Go to Page. But what page exactly? We still actually have to build this. So we are going to build a page where the user will enter their email to be sent a password reset link. So let's do that. I am going to take a shortcut here. I'm going to select to add a new page. We are going to call this forgot password. Again, I've got a dash there. And I'm going to clone this from my login page. Let's clone it from the login page. I'll hit create. And here we can see that the new page is created and all the elements and all the workflows are what we have previously built on our login page. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a bit of cleanup. I'm going to remove these workflows one by one just by clicking this trash element here. I'm going to head back to my design tab and I'm going to get rid of these text elements here. And then I'm also going to get rid of this password text and input field there because of course the user does not know their password. So essentially what we're building here is we are instructing the user to input their email address to be sent an email with a link to reset their password. But if a user landed on this page, they wouldn't know what to do. So let's add some instruction. I'm going to add a text element and set it above this email heading. I'm going to, first and foremost, let's give it some margin, 20 pixels at the top. This email text box has some margin at the top, so I don't need to add any to the bottom, but let's go 20 to the left and 20 to the right. I'm then going to head to my Appearance tab and let's add our instruction here. I'm going to say forgot password, and I'm going to add a semicolon. I'm going to quickly just add some styling to this. Let's go bold and underline here. Let's hit save. And here I can add my instructions. So I can say simply enter your email address and you will be sent a link to reset your password. Clicking away, let's see how that looks. It does look pretty good. I might just quickly fix up some of this styling. There is a space before the underline, so if I click to get rid of that, I can do it there. If we click away, it just shows that that's a little bit cleaner, and I did just show how easy it is to create some custom styling through that rich text editor box. I'm then going to change the text of my login button. Let's rename this reset password. You can see that it does fit just in the size of my text box, so there's no need to change the width, height, or the margins or padding of this button, so I'm happy with that. I'm actually going to quickly rename this as well, reset password, just so that when I do add my new workflow, it clearly says that when button reset password is clicked, we can start our workflow. Now here we've arrived at another really cool built-in feature of Bubble. You might think that sending a reset password prompt would take a bit of coding or might need a third-party tool or something like that, but super simple with Bubble. Let me show you how to do it. I'm going to select click here to add an action, and all I'm going to do is select this send password reset action here. I get to choose the email to reset, which is the input email value. So the value or the email address that the user put in here will be where the email will be sent to, and will also be the user account that the password will be reset for. Let's head back to our workflow tab. The subject, your password reset request, I'm okay with that. The body, hello, somebody, hopefully you, submitted a request to reset your password. If it wasn't you, please ignore the message. If it was you, you can set your password at the below link, the team. Now, I'm really happy with that. Thank you, Bubble, for creating this. That is fantastic. I'm now going to just test this and see how this works. But because I've input the user email as test@email.com. I actually don't have access to this inbox. So I'm going to have to show you another version of this, which I've created in the past. So let me just go to another browser to show this. So here we have the email in question. This was something I built in the past for an app called Crewmate. And here you can see the message, hello, somebody, hopefully you submitted a request to reset your password. And you can actually see that the reset password link has been generated automatically at the bottom of our email body, which is fantastic. A user would then click on this link and be directed to their reset password page. So let me jump back into our Bubble editor and show how to make that a reality. So I'm back in Bubble, and before I show the next step, which is the reset password prompt, I'm just going to go head back to my login page because there was one navigation that we didn't complete. So when I forgot my password, the go-to page destination had to be forgot password. So we've just closed that loop and made sure that our workflows are where we want to be so far. So back on task, let's say that the user has navigated to their email, they found the reset password email that we have sent through our app, through Bubble automatically, thank you, and they've clicked the link to say reset here. You may think that we have to create a password reset prompt page. However, thank you Bubble, once again, this is already built. They have already done this, and you can see here, it is this reset PW page here. If I click through to this is the first time we're viewing this. Let me go to my design tab. It's already built here. It says reset your password. It's got 2 fields for a password to be set and confirmed, and then confirm, which will trigger the workflow to reset that user's password. Now, this is fantastic. I'm just going to add my own styling to this just to make sure that it's consistent with my app. So I'm going to click on this group. I'm going to go to my style drop down and select shadowed rounded group, which as you can see, once I click that, it has added those effects. However, I do now need to add some margins. First, I'm going to bold this heading just so it's consistent with my login page. Let's go to our layout tab. I'm going to add 20 pixels margin to the top, 20 to the left, and 20 to the right. I'm also going to add 10 pixels margin to the bottom. I'm going to do the same with my input section here. Let's add 20 pixels margin to the left and 20 to the right. And it doesn't look like we need to add any to the bottom, so that's fine. Let me bold this bit of copy here. I will then go to my layout tab, 20 pixels to the left and 20 to the right. Same goes for my input confirm password, 20 to the left, 20 to the right. And it does look like we may need to add a little bit of margin. So let's go 10 pixels at the bottom for the text element. Now, just so that we are consistent, let's pull this confirm button out of the group. Before I do that, let's double check our basics of building a page. So if I click on this, you can see that the container layout is actually, it's fixed. Let's change that to column. And as you can see, there's a little bit more that we need to do. Let's add 100 pixels of margin to the top. Let's get rid of this fixed width and say that we want our minimum width to be 0 and the maximum width to be 100. And the minimum height I'm okay with. That's okay, let's leave it at that for now. Now let's take a look at what's next. For some reason, Bubble has added a group container around our shadowed box here. So I might actually head to the left of our page here and I might actually pull that out of that container. So they've called it card reset password. I can actually drag and rearrange the elements within our page layout on this left side, this elements tree on the left here, by simply dragging and dropping in the order or the sequence of our column layout. So what happens if I pull it above this group container section here? It actually brings it outside of this group, which I can then delete because I don't need it anymore. I'm then going to have to center this group, the horizontal alignment, let's center it. And now let's pull the confirm button out. It will sit below our group. They've set it as massive for some reason. Don't ask me why. Let's tick the fixed width box. Usually we don't like using fixed widths, but for buttons, it's okay. Let's center align it. Now I can quickly see that I have to add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom here. A little bit of playing around, but we like our sites to be consistent, so worth it. We're okay with this. We can now see that our page is consistent with the rest of our app. It does say reset password rather than saying email echidna in yellow, but we're okay with that. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a workflow for this confirm button. Go to the appearance and add workflow. And here is where we are wanting to reset the password of the user. Now, a cool part of this workflows tab and this section is we can actually use a search functionality. Now, I'm hoping there is an action to simply reset the user's password. So let's type in reset, and there we go. There's an option here which I can choose, reset password. Now, it's giving me two boxes where I have to input what I want the new passwords to be and the confirmation box just to ensure that the password that we want is the actual password that we have set. So let's head back to our design tab. They have called these inputs input *** twice. So let's rename these input new, and we will call this one input confirm. Now let's head back to our workflow tab. Just shows how important it is to name your elements and your groups. I'm going to insert dynamic data, which essentially means we are pulling something from our interface into our workflow. I'm going to choose this input news value as the password, and the confirmation is going to be input *** confirms value. The last thing that I have to do is once again add some navigation. We are going to navigate the user back to the login page so that they can log in with the new password that they've created, and again, close that loop and create a really nice, easy experience here. So now let's just recap what we've done. Let's go to our login page. We have created an experience where the user can log in using their email and password if they know it, and just simply log into their account there. If they don't have an account, we are going to redirect them to the registration page where they can create a new one. If they have forgotten their password, they're going to click this text. They're going to be redirected to this forgot password page where they're going to input their email and be sent a reset password email, which will include a link back to this reset password page where they will enter a new password, confirm it again just to ensure that there's no spelling mistakes or any errors, hit confirm, go back to the login page, and then they will be able to enter their email and password and access their account. Finally, let's head back to our Notion checklist and confirm what we've done. We have allowed the user to log into an existing account, redirecting to the index page, and we've allowed the user to reset a password using an email reset password prompt, set a new password, and redirect to the setting page. I'm actually going to say redirect to the login page here. Fine, just a little change and redirect to the login page. There we go.
Throughout the next module, I'm going to teach you how you can create a settings page within your email builder app. So that way, of course, people can make changes to their account and personalize their experience. Now that we've created our registration page and the login page of our email builder app, the next thing that we're going to build is a settings page to allow the user to go in and make changes to their user account or their company account. These will include changes to things like their name or their profile photo, or their company's name, logo, or default email header. We'll also be building some buttons and some workflows to allow the user to update these changes in the database, and also an alert just to let the user know that these changes have been saved in the user interface. So as usual, before we get into our build, let's head to another tab and we will check out an example of an app that I've already created which shows this setting page. Now I will notice that this page does have a header which we won't be building in this module, we'll be saving that for another module. But here you can see that we have some fields for our account settings being our name. We can simply make changes here just by replacing this text if we like. Let's call this name test legend. We can see our email address and we can see our profile photo. We can make changes to this profile photo just by clicking on this image. But for this example, I'm just going to show that it's there and I'm going to update, and we can see that the changes have been saved to the database. Let me scroll down and we can see that we have our company information. Let's say if I were to rename the company Testing Company, I can see the logo here. I can make changes to this with ease just by clicking on this and replacing it. Same goes for the default company email header. This will be applied to every new campaign that we create later in our app. But same story here, we can simply click on this and replace it if we like. But for now, I'm just going to hit update and we can see that our changes again have been saved to the database. So a nice simple build for our settings page today. Let's scroll back, not to our Notion checklist, but to our bubble editor. And as you recall, we did already create a blank canvas for our settings page when we were creating our registration workflow. So I've got my page created. Let's get started on building out our settings page. Now the first thing I'm going to do, as usual, is click on the page, bring up my property editor, and I'm going to change the layout to be the container layout of column. Just a bit of housekeeping, we have to make sure that we do this right from the start so that every element that we now place onto the page is stacked how we'd like it to be in that top to bottom column layout. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by adding a heading to this page. So I'm simply going to drag a text element onto the page. I'm going to call this account settings. Once I click away from that, let's add some style to this bit of text. I'm going to increase the size of this to be 18. I can either click to bold or I can increase the weight to 700 to be the bold look that we'd like to see. And then let's add some margin on our layout tab. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to add 20 pixels of margin to the top, 20 to the left, and 20 to the right. And let's go 10 pixels of margin at the bottom. Next, let's create the container that will hold our fields to make adjustments to our users' account settings. First thing that we're going to do, of course, is add this container layout. I'm going to head to groups on the left. I'm going to drag it onto my page. I'm first going to rename this to be user settings. We like to name our elements just so that they're easy to find in the workflow tab and the like if need be. Let's head to our appearance tab. I'm going to add my shadowed rounded group styling that I created earlier, which I really like. So that's going to add that to this group. Next, let's go to our layout tab. I'm going to adjust the width of this element. Now, usually we would make this a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of infinite so that it's fully responsive on our page. However, there is a lot of width here where there's not really a lot of input that we're going to need to create width for. So we can keep this a little bit shorter just for a nice look. So let's make this a a maximum width of 650 pixels. This way it just looks a little bit nicer on our page. It's not taking up more space than it needs to. Let's go down and also add 20 pixels of margin to the left, 20 to the right, and let's go 20 to the bottom as well. As we can see, as usual, I won't need to adjust the height of this content because we are fitting the height to the content that we're about to place in, being the headings and the fields for some of our user information. So just double checking, we're clicking on this element and we're saying that yes, it is the column container layout. So now we can start to add some of our text and input field elements. So let's add a text element first and foremost. This is going to be a heading for our name field. So let's call this name. Same story, we are going to add some weight to this text. Let's add some margin. We'll head to the layout tab. I'm going to add 20 pixels margin to the top, 20 to the left, 20 to the right, and we're going to go 10 to the bottom. And next we are going to want to display the current user's name and allow them to make changes to this. Now for this, we're going to do something a little bit different. Here we could simply show a text element which displays the current user's name. However, we are wanting to have something that is interactive and easy to change by the user should they, one day go down to the courthouse and change their name and then have to change it on this email builder app. So instead of using a text element, we are going to be using an input element. Most of the input fields that we have interacted with so far on our app have this look. As you can see, it's got this gray square border with no text in there except for this placeholder text that says type here, which is basically letting the user know that this is blank and we need you to input some new information. But in the case of our settings page, we already have some information in this data field within our database. So we are going to be setting here some initial content because we want to display the current user's name in this field. So to do that, it's very simple. Let me just quickly name this field. We're going to call this input name. And here, yes, we can display a placeholder, but the thing that I'm going to be focusing on is this initial content. So this is the first content that is going to be shown when the user loads this page. And the reason we are going to focus on this is because we're going to use dynamic data because the Bubble app is going to do a search in the database for the current user's name, and they're going to display that dynamically in this part of the app on our settings page. It's not going to be static text. We want it to be different for every user in their experience. So dynamic data and showing it in this initial content is just a cool way to start this field the right way and allow users to make some edits if they require. So let me head to my layout tab, and I'm going to add 20 pixels of margin to the left and to the right, just so that it looks nice. And let's also make one final styling change. So this input field is similar to what, like I said, what we've seen before on our login and our registration page, but it's a little bit different. So let's make it a little bit different in its styling. Let's clear the styling here, the default styling. And what I'm actually going to do, I'm not going to allow this to have a square gray box with borders all around. What I can do is make changes to each border style by clicking this button to define each border independently. So what we're doing at the moment, the entire border is a solid line with a width of 1. I could change this to be 5 if we want to make it thicker, but we don't want to do that. So let's make it back to 1. I could also change the roundness. At the moment it's 5. Could make it 20 if I wanted it to be more rounded edges. However, let's leave that at 5 again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to define each border independently. And I'm actually going to get rid of these side borders and the top border. So to do that, let me go to this border style top. I'm going to click none. As you can see, that gets rid of that top border. I'm going to do the same thing for the border on the right and the border on the left. And then what we're left with after I add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom is just this simple underline. I think that looks great. I am just going to adjust the width of this input element to be 0 of minimum width and a maximum width of infinite, so that it fits nicely in our now smaller container. I think that looks fantastic. It gives the impression that this is editable, but at the same time, it shows that it is displaying the current user's name in a nice way. I like this. This looks great. Let's see this in action. I'm going to take a look at a preview of my app to see how this is displayed and how we can interact with this with ease. So rather than clicking this preview button up here, I'm going to access the preview version of my app a little bit differently. Let's head to the data tab. I'm going to choose to run a preview as this test user, as if I'm logging in as them. So if I click run as, it'll bring up another tab and I can actually interact with the preview version of my app as if I'm logged in as this test user. Now what we can see is that it has actually loaded my current user's name in this input element, but I can actually still go in and make changes to this if I would like to. So just wanted to take a quick look to see how that dynamic data worked and how the input element could still be seen as displaying the current user's name within the settings page of our app. Just a nice way to display the initial content of a page specific to the user that is logging in to their instance. Let me take a look at the next thing that we are going to be building, which, heading back to my design tab, is the current user's email. Let me do something similar. I'm going to hit Control C and Control V because I'm happy with the style of this heading. I might actually quickly get rid of the top margin because we added 20 pixels of margin to the bottom of this input field. I'm going to rename this to be email. However, for this email field, I actually do not want to make it editable because it is the login of our user and it is because it is set as the detail that is pretty key to our email builder app login. I'm going to only display this as text. I don't really want our users to be able to edit this. So let me instead this time add a text element. Going to add it to the bottom of my email. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to use the dynamic data feature again. By clicking this insert dynamic data box, I'm going to choose to display the current user's email address. Now, this is similar to what we've just done for the initial content of our input element field. However, we can do this for a text field as well. We can display this dynamically in our version of the site. So this just displays the current user's email address. Let me go to my layout tab and just add some margin, 20 to the left, 20 to the right. It's okay to add, don't worry about the top. Let's add 20 to the bottom as well. And now we can see, let me head back to my preview. I'm going to hit refresh and hopefully this shows test@email.com. Yes, that's great. We've made a good start. The next section I'm going to add is to allow the user to make changes to their profile photo. So let's head back to our bubble editor. I'm going to add another heading like I've done a few times before. Let's call this one profile photo. Now this one is a little bit different because I am going to allow the user to first of all display, but then make changes to an image, the image that is associated with their profile photo of their user account. I'm going to not choose to add this as an image element, similar to the reason I didn't add this to be a text element. I want it to be an input element because I want the user to be able to make changes to this. If I were to add an image element underneath profile photo, this couldn't be changed. However, there is another option for me. I can choose, let me get my head out of the way. I can choose to add a picture uploader input element underneath my profile photo, which essentially is interactive and will allow the user to change this on our settings page nice and easily. Now let's take a look quickly at the property editor and see what we're greeted with. We do have a placeholder similar to what we had for the input field here. However, I'm going to add again a dynamic image using dynamic data so that I can display first and foremost whenever the user comes to this page for the first time, I'm going to display the current user's profile photo. But I'm not done. Because this profile photo element is an image, I can leave this as profile photo as it is. I don't need to display the URL or the file name. Bubble will know that this is an image file, so it will display an image, no worries. However, I do want to process this image with Imgix. So this is a cool feature that just allows me to add some formatting to my image just to make sure that it looks good regardless of the image that's uploaded or the device that it's seen on or anything of the kind. So the thing that I'm going to do using Imgix is I'm going to resize to fit the dimensions by cropping. So as you can see, the current dimensions of this image are 150 pixels by 150 pixels. Let's say if a user uploaded a rectangle image or a vertical image, if they were to do that, it would fit inside this box here, but it would skew or it might have a lot of white space because it doesn't quite fit this square look if it's a vertical or a horizontal image. However, because we have decided to resize to fit the dimensions by cropping, we are essentially increasing the size to fit the width and the height of this placeholder box so that it looks nice in our app. I will show what I'm talking about in a moment, but first I'm just going to add some styling to this picture upload element. Let's go down and let's add a roundness of 100 pixels underneath the border. What I'm doing here by having a roundness of 100 is making it a circle, which is a really cool look like that. I'm going to actually make this a little bit smaller. It's a little bit too big. Let's go a fixed width of 100 and a fixed height of 100. I'm happy to use fixed width here because there isn't really going to be an instance where our app is less than 100 pixels on any browser. That's fine. I'm then going to add 20 pixels of margin to the left, 20 to the right, and this time because it's the last element in our group, I'm going to add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom. Now let me show you what this looks like in real life. I've actually gone in and I've updated my profile photo to be a nice photo of myself. Let me go in and I'm going to hit refresh. Let's see if that photo is uploaded, and there we go. Because it has been processed with Imgix, it displays it nicely and brings it to the front. There's no white space on either side. It resizes my image to fit the dimensions that we have set in, which is 100 pixels by 100 pixels. Just a really nice looking image, particularly because it's got my mug in it. But there we go, we've done the profile image section. We can now move on to adding some functionality to allow the user to save their changes to the database. So how are we going to do that? Let's head back to our bubble editor. I'm going to go back to my design tab, and I'm going to add a button which will trigger a workflow to save these changes. Let's go to our button element on the left of our page. I'm going to simply drag it underneath the profile photo, and I'm going to label it update. This button will be called button update. However, I'm going to be using this a few times within this settings page. So let's call it update user settings. I'm going to first and foremost add some styling. Let's go 20 pixels margin to the left, 20 to the right, and 20 to the bottom. I did say that this profile photo was the last element in this group, but this one actually is, but that's okay, that looks fine. I'm now going to trigger a workflow whenever this button is clicked to save the changes that have been made during this user's experience, during the time on this settings page, if they've made changes to their name or their profile photo, going to allow the user to save those to the database. So let's hit add workflow, and let's say that whenever this button update user settings is clicked, we're wanting to save the changes to the user record in our database. And the way that we are going to do this is nice and simple. We're going to choose the option underneath account to make changes to the current user. So if we click this, we're given this option, we are going to be able to add some fields that we are going to want to make changes to. The two fields in this instance that we are going to make changes to, or we're going to save the changes that have been made, are the name. So let's choose to change the current user's name according to the value that is in our input name field, the value, which is fine. So any changes that are made to this input name field will be saved when we hit this update button. And then also we are going to change the user's profile photo to whatever value is in our picture upload A's value. Just quickly, I didn't rename this, which is pretty critical. Let's call this picture profile picture. So just heading back to our workflow tab, just showing the importance of naming your elements. Picture uploader profile picture's value is going to be what is saved to the database. Now there is one more thing that I'm going to add. Let's go to our email builder preview here, and I'm going to show what happens if I decide to make changes. So let's go testing the changes as the name of this user. If I go ahead and click update, nothing really happens on the interface. However, in the back end, I do know that these changes are being saved. So if I click refresh, because I've saved those changes to and made those changes to the current user, we can see that testing the changes is now the current user's name. So those changes have been saved. However, the user doesn't quite know that. So let's create an alert to let them know that their changes have been saved. To do that, nice and simple, I'm going to head back to my bubble editor, back to the design tab, and I can create an alert, which is a cool little element that I can add to the top of my page. I'm just going to simply drag it here to the top of my page. And this will essentially flash to say that, yes, you have saved your changes, after we do a bit of mucking around with the style here just to say, yes, you have saved your changes. Everything is great. Everything is saved to the database. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say that, let's call this changes saved is going to be the text that I'm going to display in this alert. We are also going to choose to position this alert at the top. This isn't quite at the top of our page. This is rather at the top of our browser. So let's say, for example, if the user has scrolled halfway down the page, it'll still show at the top. They don't have to scroll all the way to the top of the page to see it. I'm going to choose to, let's get rid of this standard alert style. I'm going to choose to display some white text. So this text is white. You can't quite see it at the moment, but that's because the background color doesn't look great. Let's change this background color to be green. Green means good. We are saying that yes, we have saved the changes, and green means it is complete. Let's get rid of the border. Let's say border of none, so that we don't have that yellow border around it. And let's also make it not fixed width, minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of infinite, so that regardless of the browser width that the user is viewing this page on, that looks nice and looks nice at the top of our page. The height I'm fine with. Let's click away. I'm going to just quickly show what that looks like. It shows us this nice green alert here. However, we are then going to want to add that as a step or an action in our workflow. So let's head back to our workflow tab. And we are basically saying here that once we have saved these changes to the current user, we want to display that alert. So nice and simple, if I click here to add another action, I can just search alert, which allows me to show this action of show message in an alert box, which we've already set up. Let's choose to show the alert changes saved element, which is fine. And essentially what we're seeing here is the animation timings. These are the time it takes to fade in our alert, to hold the alert on the screen and fade it out. So at the moment, we are set at 500 milliseconds, which is half a second fade in, 2000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds to hold it on the screen, and 500 milliseconds rather, to fade it out, meaning when it disappears from the screen nice and slow. Let's take a look at what this looks like. I'm going to head back to my preview app. Let's hit refresh. Let's just get rid of the, and I'm going to say testing changes. If I hit update, we can see our alert nice there.
That looks great. I know with confidence that my changes have been saved to the database. So well done everyone so far. We have created a space for the user to make changes to their account settings in our Bubble app. Let me go ahead and let's allow the user to make changes to their company settings by, first and foremost, let's take a bit of a shortcut. I shouldn't usually do this, but let's simply copy Control-C, and I'm going to paste this settings page just so that we can take a little bit of a shortcut. The bubble gods might be worrying about what I'm doing here, but that's okay. Let's copy and paste this. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the fields that I don't need. I don't need my email address or this email address. Here, I'm going to be saying that we are allowing the user to make a change to their company name. So that's the company name here. This input field, I'm going to first and foremost rename to be input company name. This way I can differentiate it from the existing input name field in my workflow tab. The initial content that I'm going to show is not the current user's name, but here I'm going to show the current user's company's name. Now this is our relational database in action. If I head back to my data tab, I'm not changing any fields to do with the current user. I'm not changing the name of their profile photo. I'm changing something to do with the company that they are related to. And when I head to my company tab, I'm then changing their current user's company's name. So that's just a way that Bubble makes it super easy to link these databases together and to change another data type that is related to the current user. Really cool function, super easy to use, and something that we will continue to use throughout the build of our app. So let me say that yes, we are displaying the current user's company's name, and we are allowing the user to make changes to those. Rather than displaying here the profile photo, let's choose to display a heading for our company's logo. Let's say company logo. Company logo, that is fine. And here, similar to what we've done for our initial content, let's first and foremost rename this to say this is a picture uploader for the logo. I'm going to be displaying the current users. Let's get rid of this text actually. Current users company's logo. Again, I'm going to process this with Imgix. Let's resize to fit the dimensions by cropping and hit close. And now we can say we'll do a quick little test to just ensure that we are displaying the right content. If I hit refresh and move my head out of the way again, we can see that our company name of testing company has been loaded. That's great. And our default company logo is also shown in the initial content of our picture uploader. So we did just take a little bit of a shortcut, but this just saves some time and ensuring that our settings sections are consistent. So I'm okay with this. The bubble gods will be okay with this as well. So let's move on. The next thing I'm going to add is a section for the user to display and change their default company email header. Now I'm going to click back to my bubble editor. I am going to copy and paste this heading here. Let's call this company default email header. Now I am skipping ahead a little bit here, but essentially this default email header will be the header that is loaded automatically into every single one of our new campaigns that we create later in our email builder experience. Thing to keep in mind is that the size of this default email header and every email header that we upload to every campaign in our app has to be 600 pixels wide by 200 pixels high. So I'm just going to add that as an instruction into my heading here, because regardless of whether we upload it as the default email header or a new email header throughout our experience later down the line, it has to be 600 pixels wide by 200 pixels high. Just a little requirement, but that's okay. We've made it super clear here that that is what is required, so we can now move on. Similar to what we've done for our company logo and our profile photo, let's choose to display a picture uploader element. I'm going to place it below my heading here. And what I can do, let me first and foremost rename it. Let's say picture uploader default email header. I'm going to choose to display a dynamic image being the current user's company's default email header, just so that when a user visits this page, they can see what is currently in their database. They can currently see their current email header. And I'm going to now just quickly add some margin, some styling. I'm going to add, sorry, getting my
head out of the way again. It's been in the way a fair bit during this module. 20 pixels margin to the left, 20 to the right, and let's add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom. Now I'm going to choose to display this element as, yes, a fixed width. We're going to display it as 600 pixels wide by 200 pixels high, just to see that whenever a user does upload their default email header, it does look good, and they're going to make sure that it is that size requirement. If it is too small, it will skew or it will show some white space just to say, hey, this isn't the right size, you need to make a change to it. So the company default email header is 600 pixels by 200 pixels. That is fine. Before I go ahead and I test this in my preview app, I just realized actually that in my data tab, I haven't set a default for this default email header. So in the background, I have actually gone in and created a default email header, which I will upload now, and I will actually make available in this course. So let me go ahead and upload it for you. And I've uploaded this default email image here, which just lets the user know to add your email header here whenever they head to this settings page for the first time. They need to add their own custom email header, similar to what we've done for the custom logo and the profile photo. The defaults are just set there, nice and easy. Heading back to my app data, I have also gone ahead and added a default email header personalized for our experience. So this is just, here's my awesome emails with a nice purple background. If I head to my email builder now, I'm just going to hit save. My preview app, I should see this displayed as the initial content. Let's take a look, and there we go. Here's my awesome email header. It is, as you can see, 600 pixels by 200 pixels. You can't see much white space, so I know and I'm confident that the sizing of my default email header is correct. Last step, let's go ahead and allow the user to update their account settings or save these changes to their company information using a workflow. So I'm going to head back to my Bubble editor. Let's click on this update tab. I'm going to choose to add a workflow. Man, my head is being annoying. Add a workflow. Let's say that whenever the user clicks this update, one thing I haven't done, I haven't renamed this button. Naughty me. That just shows the importance of renaming things when you are copying and pasting. Let's say company settings. We are updating company settings. Let's head back to our workflow tab. Whenever the button update company setting is clicked, we are going to do something similar to what we've done. We're going to make changes not to the current user. We're going to choose to make changes to a thing. This is underneath the data section of our actions here. Just a different way to navigate to it. And when we choose to make changes to a thing, we have to decipher we are making changes to a data type. So we aren't making changes to a data field just yet. We aren't making changes to any of these things just yet. Like I said very early in this course, we like to think of a data type as a thing. So we are making changes to a thing. We are making changes to the current user's company, which is this record here. So just a little bit of a workaround, but I have to mention that because this catches me out pretty often. So the thing that we are going to change is the current user's company. We're not going to change any of these data fields just yet. We are changing a thing, we are changing a data type, we are changing the current user's company. However, here we can choose to change their fields. So here we can add a field that we are going to change, and we are going to change their, first and foremost, the name. The company name that we are going to change is the value that is in our input company name field there, nice and simple. Next, we are going to change their logo. So we're going to choose to change the logo field based on whatever value is in the picture uploader logo element. That's great, nice and easy, pretty simple. And lastly, we are going to change the default email header to be whatever value is in the picture uploader default email header element. Lastly, we are also going to display that alert that we created earlier. Let's type in the word alert, show message in alert box. I'm liking that animation that is set up as default by Bubble. I'm liking these timings. Let's go ahead and test this and hopefully wrap up this module. Email builder, the custom, let me hit the refresh button. Logging in as the user that we have created. Let's call this testing business. Let's not go ahead and update the company logo or the default email header. I'm just going to hit update. Hopefully, yes, we have shown our alert. That is great. Let me head back to my database just to prove that it has worked in the background. I'm going to hit refresh just to
refresh the database. The development database I'm talking about, go away, pop up. And here we can see the new name of testing business has been saved to our database. Job is done for this settings page. Great work, everyone. Let's head to our Notion checklist just to ensure that we have covered everything off. We have created our settings page first and foremost. We have displayed the initial content by displaying dynamic data in that initial content section. We have built the workflow to update the user's personal settings, so personal details rather, their name or their profile photo. We have set the default company header, so which is in the app data section in that default email header part of our database. And then lastly, we have built the workflow to update our company details, separate to the personal details, because we might want to change our company details a bit more regularly if we're uploading a new logo or a new default email header. That might happen more so than our user page, but we have created our settings page. Great work, everyone. Well done.
Following on from this module, the next section of our course is going to be around adding a header navigation menu, not only to our settings page, but preparing it to be added to all of our pages.
Working our way through the list of features on our Notion checklist, the next thing that we are going to cover is building a navigation menu. This will sit at the top of our page and allow our users to jump between sections of our applications nice and seamlessly. Now this will be a little bit different to the builds we've done so far, but I'll walk through it slowly. Let's jump right into our bubble editor. Now, when building a header menu, I'm given two options. I could choose option 1, which is to add a group container to the top of my page, create my header menu, and then copy and paste that across every page within my application. However, if I were to want to make an adjustment to that header, I'd then have to go and do that to every single instance where it is on my app. That would take a lot of time and effort. So Bubble gives us an awesome alternative. Let me introduce you to reusable elements. So if I go to the drop down in the top left hand of my page here, I can see this option to add a new reusable element. And essentially this is just how it sounds. It's an element that we can use through multiple pages on our application. We can pre-build, and then if we make an adjustment later down the line, this will have an effect everywhere that this reusable element is placed in our application, saving us a lot of time and effort. Here, I'm going to give my reusable element a name of header menu. And let's see what happens when I click create. Here we are greeted with something that looks a little bit different to what we've experienced before. Usually when we create a new page, it creates a full width and full sized blank canvas for us to add elements to, which will then form a page. However, here we're seeing something a little bit smaller. And the reason we're doing that is because essentially what we're seeing here is an individual group. We're not seeing a page, we are seeing an individual group that we can reuse throughout our app. Now, of course, to this, we can add multiple elements, but the first thing that I'm going to cover before I do that is I'm going to set my container layout to be a row. This is the first time we've used a row layout in this course, so this is super exciting. And here we're given a few options. So by default, lucky for us, Bubble sets the minimum width to be 0 and maximum width of infinite, which is great because it means that by default this is responsive. It does set a minimum height of 200 and maximum height of infinite. I'm going to leave that for now because the thing I want to address is this default builder width. Now currently this is set to 200 pixels. This is just the space that we have to work with in our Bubble editor. This has no bearing on what the end user sees. So I can increase this to 900, which just allows me to have a little bit more space to work with when I'm building out my reusable element. Now, before I add some elements to this reusable element, I'm going to just change the minimum height to be 70 pixels because that's the size that I like to work with when I'm creating headers for my applications. Now, before we go any further, I want to jump into another browser where I can show you a pre-built version of the header that we will be building in this module. So let me jump not into my Notion checklist, but into this tab here, where we can see a version of the email echidna app that I have pre-built. So here we can see we have an echidna icon, which is just an image element. I then have a text element, which is the name of my application. I then have this nice big bit of space, followed by a link to my campaigns list page,
my recipients list page, and then my sends list page. And then I have an image here, which is a link to my settings page. I'm going to walk through nice and slowly how we can build this as a reusable element to use on every page within our Bubble application. So let's get started. I'm going to head back to my Bubble editor. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a group to this group. Might sound a bit confusing, but I'll explain. So if I add a group here, I'm just going to do one little trick that helps me personally. I'm going to head to my appearance tab. I'm going to detach the style, and I'm just for the time being going to change the background style of this group to be a flat color. And I'm going to choose this light gray color here. That way, when I start to play around with the widths, I can see the space that I'm working with. So just a personal preference of mine, just so I can see that within this wide group, I can see what I'm working with. Now in this group, I'm going to be setting an icon next to the site title, which is essentially two elements side by side. So because we're doing that, I'm going to head up and I'm going to change my container layout to be a row. This way, when I add my elements, they're going to be stacked side by side, which is great. Let me go ahead and add my first element. I'm going to head to the left of my page and I'm going to choose to select an image element and drag it into my group here. It blows it up pretty large, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about that right now, because the image that I'm going to add is a static image of my echidna icon for my application. Now I have uploaded this and downloaded this to my Google Drive, so you can see it here. I'm just going to go back to my Bubble editor and I'm going to upload this as a static image. Now that's uploaded. It looks a little bit skewed, and the reason that is because it's not the aspect ratio that I want it to be. I've actually set this to be a square image, so my aspect ratio of 1:1 makes it look a lot nicer, which is great. Now I don't want it to be this big. I only want it to be a width and height of 50 pixels, making it a little bit smaller, which is much nicer for my header. I'm going to leave that as is for now, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add my email echidna text, which is the title of my site. Let's simply type in here email echidna. I'm going to add some styling here. Let's increase the size because it's the name of our application. Let's blow it up to 24 pixels. I'm going to also bold it or make it a weight of 700. I'm also going to make it white. And then last but not least, I'm going to head to my layout tab and I'm going to choose to vertically align this element in the center of my group. This will just put it in a nice position relative to the height, the top and bottom border of this group, which is fantastic. I'm also just quickly going to do the same for my icon. I'm going to vertically align it. And while I'm here in my icon, let's add 20 pixels of margin to the right here, just to add some space between my icon and my email echidna text there. Now, one last bit of styling. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my group. I'm going to choose to remove this minimum width just for best practice. It's going to be a minimum width of 0, maximum width of infinite. What I'm going to do, I'm going to fit the width to the content, which just fits the edges of the group nicely around my two elements. Then, final step, I'm going to add a little bit of margin to these. Let's go 5 pixels on the top, 5 on the bottom. Let's go 30 pixels on the left. And just for safety, we'll go 20 pixels on the right. So the next thing I'm going to do is add my navigation elements as a group. So I'm going to drag a group container over here. For some reason, it's put it in that weird location. So let me click next. I'm also going to, just for my own benefit, I'm going to detach this style and I'm going to set a flat color background of, let's go a nice red this time, just so I can see what I'm working with. Now, before I do any styling or spacing or anything of the like, let me just add in my elements and then we can deal with it shortly. So the first text element that I'm going to add will be a navigation element, but we'll add that workflow shortly. The first text element I'm going to add is simply a bit of text saying campaigns. Let me add some styling to this because it's my header menu and it's a navigation element. We'll make it stand out a little bit more. Let's go a size of 18. I'm also going to bold this. And let's make it white as well so that it fits the other styling that we'd like for our elements. Let's go to my layout tab. I will first and foremost just need to change this container layout to be a row so that I can fit my text elements side by side to form that navigation. I'm then going to head back to my text element and I'm going to center the vertical alignment of this element like this. I'm then going to add 10 pixels of margin to the right there
I'll show you why I'm doing this shortly, but for now, I think that looks okay. Like I mentioned, we'll adjust some of the other styling and the margins shortly, but now what I'm going to do is add my second navigation element, and that is for my recipients list. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this and paste. Like before, it's copied the styling and it's added that nice bit of spacing. That's why I added the margin to the right. But what we're going to do, we're going to replace this text with the word recipients. That looks great. I'm going to add the workflow to add that navigation element shortly. Let's do it one more time. I'm going to copy and paste. We're going to replace this with the word sends. This is going to be my list of sends, my record of my receipts of send campaigns, which is great. Now the last thing I'm going to add is a navigation element for my settings, which, let's make it a bit stylish. I'm going to add an image element and add it to the right here. It's jumped it around there, which is strange. It does that automatically for some reason, Bubble. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to display the current user who is logged in, their profile picture. So nice and simple, let's add this as a dynamic image. We're going to display the current user's profile photo. And like we've done before, we are going to process this with Imgix. We're going to resize to fit the dimensions by cropping. Just nice and simple to make it all look great. Now this is obviously pretty massive. What we're going to do is we are going to first and foremost add another little bit of styling. Let's add a border around this profile picture. We're going to add a solid border to 1 pixel of width, and let's make it a white border. That will look nice when we see it in our preview. We're going to also put a roundness of 100 to make it a circle. We're going to then head to our layout tab, and I'm going to keep it as a fixed width, and I'm just going to set the width of 40, and I'm going to have a fixed aspect ratio of 1:1, just to have this nice circle, small border look, which is great. Lastly, I'm just going to vertically align it in the center, and there we can see we have our navigation side of the menu all done. I'm just going to fit the width to the content so that it fits nice and snug around there. And there we have our second group. Now this is where I'm going to show you something really cool. The alignment here to add a dynamic bit of space between these two elements will be pretty hard to do with margins and the like, but lucky for us, Bubble makes this super simple. If I click on this group, I'm given the option first and foremost to choose to align these elements to the left of the container, to the middle of the container or the center, or to the right. Or I'm going to skip over this one. I am given the option to choose to select an alignment that is called space between. Now look what happens when I select this. Our elements are pushed to the outsides of this group, which looks fantastic. If I head across to my responsive version of my editor, I can drag it, and as you can see, this space between these two groups dynamically changes, and it actually looks really fantastic. That's just allowing us to have that dynamic or the responsive design that we are going for. I'm going to head back to my Bubble editor. I'm going to do some quick styling changes. Let's simply vertically align these two groups in the center just so they fit nicely off the top and the bottom. Let's also just add, let's go 30 pixels margin to the left, to the right of our group on the right there, so it sits off. Same goes to the left of our group here, so that it sits off there. Now what we're going to do, I want to add that nice yellow color that we saw in the preview app, and that is the style of our application. So let me click on this header menu. I'm going to go to my appearance tab, and let's change this background flat color to be our nice yellow. I'm then going to, because I've finished off the editing here, I'm going to change this group's background to be no background style, which looks great. Same goes for this group here. We're going to go like that. So that looks fantastic. We've completed the styling of our header element, which is fantastic. The next thing that we are going to do is add the workflows to make this interactive and create this to be a true navigation menu. Now the first bit of navigation that we are going to add is allowing a user to navigate to the home page whenever they click either of these two elements. It's pretty standard with most website and applications nowadays. Whenever they click the brand, they go home or to the index page or to a dashboard. So to do that, I'm not going to click on these individual elements. I'm actually going to click on this group. So basically, whenever a user clicks anywhere in this group, the workflow will trigger. So let's add that workflow. I'm going to say that whenever that group, the title group is clicked, we are going to navigate to a page, and that page is our index page. So basically whenever they click either of these elements or just this group in general, they will be taken to the index page. Next, let's add navigation to this right group here. I'm going to add individual workflow to all of these text elements. Let's start off with campaigns first and foremost. So I'm going to add a workflow that whenever that text campaigns is clicked, we are going to navigate to a page. Now this page I actually haven't created yet. Lucky for us, Bubble makes this easy to do right here from the workflow tab. I'm going to click this drop down and I'm going to create a new page. Now this page will be a campaign list. It'll be a list of all of our campaigns, not an individual campaign, because I'll show the reason that we're not doing that in a few modules time. But essentially we're just going to be showing a list of campaigns for the user to select to access. Let's create this. I'm not going to clone it from an existing page. Let's just hit create. I'm going to now select that page from the drop down, and there we have it. Whenever the user clicks this campaign text, it'll go to the campaign list. Let's do the same for our recipients. I'm going to add a workflow. Whenever this text recipients is clicked, we are going to navigate to a page. Again, this page doesn't yet exist, so let's call this page recipient list. That's where we want to go. We'll want to go to our list of recipients to choose to add a recipient or access an existing one. We're going to add it to the recipient list, and there we go. Heading back, we have done that successfully. Let's then do our sends text second lastly rather. We are going to say that whenever that text sends is clicked, we are navigating to a page, which once again, we're going to create a page called send list, not cloning it from anything. We're going to hit create, and now let's select it from this drop down, if it'll let me. There we go, send list, very nice. Now lastly, whenever the user clicks this image, which is their profile photo, we want to allow them to navigate to the settings page, which we've already created. So let's go ahead and add a workflow that whenever that profile image is clicked, they're going to navigate to the settings page. All done. Nice work. Okay, let's now add this to our settings page so that we can see it in action. I'm going to head to the top left-hand side of my screen, and I'm going to select the settings page. And now to add my reusable elements, just quickly, if I were to edit my reusable elements, I would have to access it by clicking this drop down. However, if I want to add it to a page, I'm going to head to the left of my screen here and scroll down. And here you can see just under my head that there is this reusable elements section, which I can then actually just drag across onto my page and sit like that. Nice and easy. I will quickly mention that if I were to want to make changes to this, I could do this in my reusable header menu section here, which we just saw, and that will take effect on all of the pages that we have added our reusable element to. So later in this course, I will be adding the header menu to things like my campaign list and my index page and the like. However, let's just leave that as it is for now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to head into a preview version of my app and give it a try. So heading across to my data tab, let me run a preview of my application as if I am this user that we created, this test user. Once it opens up, you see that we are on our settings page. And now if I click this space here, hopefully I will be taken to my index page, which is currently blank. We'll know that we're on our index page because this settings word won't be here because we are on our home page. Let's take a look. And there we go. We've navigated to our index page. As another test, I'm just going to say we're going to navigate to our recipients page. If I do that, hopefully this settings word here will be replaced with recipients list. And there we go. It looks like it's worked correct. Great work. If I were to click this image here, it would navigate me to my settings page. However, I'm already on this page, so that's not going to work. But well done. We've successfully created our reusable header element. Let me go back to my Notion checklist and tick off, and we revise what we've done. We have built the navigation menu as a reusable element. We've added the navigation workflows. Like I said, we haven't quite added the menu to each page just yet. We're going to do that as we build out our site. So I'll tick that off for now. So well done, everybody. Throughout the next module, we're going to make a start on creating the WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, email builder. This is the cool stuff.
Working our way down our list of features for our email builder app, the next thing that we'll be doing in this course is to build the actual email builder on the campaign page. Now this is where we get into the really fun stuff. We will be building a what you see is what you get builder, which is what these letters here say. This is WYSIWYG, which is a pretty common term. Might sound a little funny, but that's what we're building for our email builder app. To explain what I mean, let me jump into another tab and show you the preview of the email builder app that we'll be creating at the end of this course. As you can see, we're on our email builder page here. We have a campaign name here, which is the name of the campaign that will appear in our list. We have who the email is coming from, which is our email address that we are going to set up to send our emails through. We have a subject line. We have our default email header that we can change. And then we have our copy that we will be putting all the important information of our email in. We also have a few buttons. Any changes that we make, we can save to this campaign. We can also delete this campaign if we don't like it. And then lastly, we can also choose to send this email or send this campaign to our recipients. Once we hit send, you'll see that there are these pop-ups. In this instance, I don't have any recipients set up, so it'll say no recipients. However, when I do have recipients added to my campaign or added to my email builder app, it will allow me to actually send this campaign to my recipients. So there's a fair bit to cover in this module. Let's get started. I'm going to jump across into my Bubble editor and I'm going to first and foremost create a new page. Now we have our campaign list, but this isn't quite the page that we're going to use. We are going to use an individual campaign page. So let's go ahead and add a new page. Let's call it our campaign page. I'm not going to clone it from anything. Let's just hit create. As normal, before we get started, let's make sure that the page container layout for this page is a column. That's fine. Now we can stack our elements from top to bottom. I'm now going to do something which I'll do from now on for every page that I create, and that will be to add in my reusable header. So let me scroll down to my visual elements on the left, and I'm simply going to drag my header menu to the top of my page here. And now because we've set this as a column container layout, that will be at the top of my page, and any subsequent elements that we add are going to be added on top of each other, like the column layout that we've used before. Now, before we start adding our elements, there is one additional thing that we are going to do, which is going to be a little bit different to what we've done before, but we'll use this a little bit consistently as we go throughout the rest of our email builder app build. Now, as we build out these individual pages like our campaign page or our recipient page or our sends page, these are going to show individual records within our database. So there's going to be a lot of different variations of this page in essence using the same template from an existing record in our database. So essentially what I mean here is we are wanting to display data on this page from an existing record in our database. Now this is really easy to set up in Bubble and is a really awesome feature. What I'm going to do is head to my Appearance tab, and I'm going to say that the type of content that I want to display on this page is a campaign from our database. So the data type of campaign is what I'll want to show on this page. Now to further show what I mean, let me just quickly use a text element where I'm going to display some dynamic data. If I click this blue Insert Dynamic Data option, and here it gives me the opportunity to show data from the current pages campaign. So the data source is the current pages campaign. This could be the name or the body or the subject line, which we will use in this module. However, when we say that the user is going to click onto this page, they are going to click to a certain record in the database, which will be the current pages campaign. Might sound a little bit confusing, but it'll make sense as we go on with our build. Just want to show that this is where we can set our data source for this page. So now that I've explained that, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to add is a new group to my page, and that is because I'm going to want to display my campaign name and those buttons that we saw on the preview. Now these are going to be elements that are stacked side by side, so I'm going to have to set the container layout of this group to be a row. This means that I'll stack my elements horizontally as I want them to be displayed. Now, just so I know what I'm working with, let me just, for the time being, I'm going to detach this style. I'm going to choose a flat color background of just a light gray, just so that I can see where I'm adding my elements.
I'm then going to head to my layout tab. I'm going to remove that this is a minimum width element. I'm going to set the maximum width. This time I'll set it to be 650. And I'm also going to center align it just so that it fits nicely in our page. I'm also going to add 20 pixels of margin to the top, 20 to the bottom, and 20 to the left, and 20 to the right, just so that it'll fit nicely as it grows or shrinks, dependent on the device that users are visiting this page on. Lastly, just as good practice, let me name this group header, just so that it's all organized in my campaign elements tree over here as well. Now, let me start adding my elements. The first thing I'm going to add is a place to add my campaign name. Let me first and foremost just add a bit of a header here. Let's say campaign name. This will just be a placeholder, which is the instructional piece. Let me go and first and foremost, I'm going to bold this. I'm also going to make it a size of, let's go 18 pixels just because it's a heading. I want it to be a little bit bigger. Let's also vertically align this in the center just so that it fits nicely there. And I'm just going to add a small bit of margin to the right. Let's just go 5 pixels so that when I add my actual campaign name, it just sits off it a little bit nicely. Now next, we are going to add a place for the current page's campaign name to be either added or edited. So because we'll be editing this field, let's make this an input field. So I'm going to scroll down, I'm going to add an input element, and I'm going to add this next to my group name there. Now before I do anything, let me just give this a name. So we're going to call this input campaign name, which will help me in my workflows a little bit later on. My placeholder being type here is fine. Now here I'm going to display my initial content as dynamic data, and I'm going to display the current page campaign's name. So this is the campaign name of the data that is on our current page. Now remember, we will be allowing our users to change this, so that's why we've chosen for this to be an input element. But I'm just going to head to my layout tab. I'm just going to center align this vertically again so that it fits nicely within our group. I'm going to choose not to make this a fixed width element. I'm actually going to make it a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of infinite. I'm happy with the height, and the margins, they look okay. I'm going to leave them as they are for now, which is fine. Now, similar to what we've done on our settings page, let's just change the style of this a little bit so that it's not this boxed border sort of look. We're only going to have the underline. So let's head to my appearance tab. We're going to change the border style. We're going to allow you, we are going to define each border independently. We're going to say that the top border, we don't want to have one, so let's go none. Same goes for the border on the left and the border on the right, which I've just missed. There we go there. And then as you can see, we have that cool underline input feature that we have seen before, just so that it's consistent with our site. Next, I'm going to add a button so that the user can actually save these changes and save the changes that they make to this campaign against our database. So let me head to my visual elements on the left here. I'm going to choose to add a button to my group, and this button is going to be for my save. Let's edit the label. I'm going to instruct the users that they can save their changes by clicking this button. I'm going to also add a delete button here, so let me make this a little bit smaller as it's taking up a fair bit of space. Let's just make it 100 pixels, so that fits a little bit nicely. It still displays the word save, which is fine. I'm also going to add some margin. Let's go 5 pixels to the top, 5 to the bottom, 5 to the left, and 5 to the right. Let's see how that looks. I'm also going to vertically align it in the center just so that it fits nicely. I think that looks great. Let's do the same. I'm going to actually copy this and paste it. This is going to be our delete button though. So this is going to allow users to actually delete this campaign if they don't like it, or if they no longer need to send it. We're just going to make this our delete button. So we'll change the name to be delete. The styling's okay there. I like how that looks. Let me go ahead. I'm actually going to remove this background style now that we've set up this row container. That looks great. That's a great header for our campaign page. Next is the cool part. Let's make our WYSIWYG email builder. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new group, which is going to have my cool style of the shadowed border. So let me add that first and foremost. We are going to call this our shadowed rounded group. Now I'm going to head to my layout tab, and I'm going to set this again to fixed width of 650 pixels. Let's get rid of the minimum width. I'm also just going to say that the minimum height that I want this to be, let's say 600 pixels so that I have some space to work with. Oh, it's a little bit much. Let's go 400 pixels. That looks a bit better. As we add elements, that'll grow. That's fine by me. I'm then also going to center align it to my page. And lastly, let's add a name for our group. Let's call this what you see is what you get. There we go. WYSIWYG builder there. Now, as we look away, that looks great. I can now add the elements within this email builder so that it is that what you see is what you get experience that we saw earlier. Now, within this group, we are going to make sure that it is a column layout, which is fine. I'm then going to add another group, which will be a row container. So let's add our group, row container. We want it to be a row. This is going to be where we are going to display who the email is coming from. So let's call this group from info. That's fine. Lastly, as normal, let's just remove the minimum width to be 0, maximum width of infinite, and I will add some margin. Let's go 10 pixels on the top, and let's just go as normal. We'll go 10 on the left and 10 on the right, just so that it sits off a little bit nicely. That looks great. Now I'm actually, just so that I can see what I'm working with, let me change the background style again. Flat color, let's go a bit of a red this time. So just a light red there, just so that we can see the space that we have to work with when we start adding our elements. Now, similar to what we've done for our campaign name section here, I'm going to add first and foremost just a text element where I'm going to say the word from. I'm also going to bold this. I'm going to keep it sort of small, so let's say just bold there, because I'm going to display in the next element where the email is coming from. Let's just first and foremost just vertically align this in the center. We will change the height of this element just so that it fits nicely in the grander scheme of our what you see is what you get email builder. And I might actually, just similar to what we've done for the campaign name section as well, let me add 5 pixels of margin to the right, just so that when we add our next element, it's a little bit spaced from this first element. Next, we're going to add another element. And in this instance, I'm not going to allow the user to change this, because the person that it's coming from, or the user that it's coming from this email, is going to be, I guess, essentially locked or decided in the settings page or in the SendGrid template, which we'll show shortly, but we're not going to get there just yet. I'm going to, in that case, not add an input element. I'm going to instead just add a text element to my group here. And here, let me do my styling work first. Let me just vertically align it in the center. Let's go back to our appearance tab. And here I'm going to display some dynamic data once again. And the dynamic data that I'm going to display is the current user's company. I'm not going to display the current campaign's company, because this doesn't have anything to do exactly with this individual campaign. This is the account as a whole. So I'm going to display the current user's company's name. That's fine by me. I just want to say that when I send my emails, the email is going to come from the current user's company that they set in the settings page. I'm also going to say, just for this visual element, I'm going to add a space here, and I'm going to also display the current user's email, because this is the email address that we will also be sending our emails through Email Echidna through. Now, as one last little bit of styling, I want to bold the current user's company's name, but not the current user's email. So let me do that in my rich text editor. I'm going to choose to bold the current user's company's name. And when I do that and hit save, you can see it adds my text source code magic there that just says that anything in between these B brackets looking things here is going to be bold. It's just a cool rich text editor styling little feature, which just allows us to add some quick styling to our text elements. Now that I've completed that, I'm going to head back to my group. Let me just remove this styling. I'm going to first and foremost just remove the minimum height. I'm going to fit the height to the content. That's fine. Then I'm going to go to my appearance tab, and I'm going to remove the flat color background just so that sits nicely there. You know what I might do, I might actually just add a little bit more margin just so it looks a little bit nicer. Let's go 20 pixels margin to the left and 20 to the right. And let's also go 20 from the top, just so that it is consistent and looks nice. That looks a little bit nicer. So now that we've got that completed, I'm now going to add a section for my user to add their subject line for this campaign. So similar to what I've done in this instance, let me go to my group container. I'm going to drag it into my builder. Let me set the layout to be a row so that I can stack my elements side by side. I'm then going to name this group to be, I called this from info, let's call this subject line, that's fine. Subject line. I'm also going to set it to be no minimum width, just as normal, and the maximum width of infinite. I'm then going to head to my appearance tab, and I'm just going to set a background style, a flat color, and I'll make it my nice light red again, just so that I can see what I'm working with. And I'll also just head to my layout tab. Let's add the same margin. We'll go 20 to the left and 20 to the right. And let's add 10 pixels of margin from the top, just so that it sits off our from info group a bit nicely there. Now I'm going to head to my text elements. I'm going to add it to my row container here. Let's firstly center vertically align it. And here we're going to say that the following text will be the current campaign's subject line. So I'm going to bold that just so that it's similar to what we see above. And there we go. I'm also lastly going to add 5 pixels of margin to the right so that when I place my next element, it'll just sit off it a little bit nicely there. Now this next element, I will allow my users to change the current campaign subject line. So here I'm going to add an input field to this row container. This one, first and foremost, we will call this input subject line. And the placeholder of type here is fine. The initial content that I want to display if a user returns to this campaign is the current page's campaign's subject line. Now I will allow my user to make changes to this. That's why I've chosen this input element. Let's change the styling just one little bit more as we usually do. Let's define each border independently. We're going to remove the border style on the top, remove it on the right, we'll leave it on the bottom, and we will change it on the left to be non-existent as well. And then we will also vertically align it in the center, and we'll make it a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of infinite, just so that it fits nicely in our email builder that we see here. Now that that's done, let me do my styling here. I've found a misspelled subject line, sorry about that. I'm going to remove my background style to be none. I'm also going to change the minimum height to be 0. I'm going to choose to fit the height to the content. And there is a little bit of spacing here, which I can see is because my input subject line is 48 pixels high. So let's choose not to have that as a fixed height. And because the size of this font is 14 pixels, let's choose to set the minimum height to be, let's say, 30 pixels. That looks a bit more snug. I'm happy with that. That looks great. So now that we have our from and subject line groups complete, the next thing that we're going to add is a place to display and change the current campaign's email header. Now, because we are going to allow the user to make changes to this, we're not going to display a image visual element. We are instead going to display let me just move my head out of the way so I can see, a picture uploader element. I'm going to drag that into my builder here. And first, as normal, let me just change it to be picture uploader. Let's just call this email header. Now, before I go ahead and display actually what image I'm going to display here, let me change some styling. Let's make it a fixed width of 600 so that it's the same as what we set in our settings. And like I said in the previous module, this is going to be very important that our headers are a width of 600 pixels. We're going to also say it is going to be a height of 200 pixels as well. Let's also center align this from the horizontal alignment perspective. And we'll also add, let's say, 10 pixels of margin to the top. And just for safety, let's go 10 to the left and 10 to the right as well. Now that I've got that styling complete, let's add an initial email header to this picture uploader element. I'm going to head to my appearance tab. I'm going to leave the placeholder as it is, that's fine. But for the initial content, I'm going to choose to display a dynamic image. And the image that I'm going to display first and foremost, I could choose to display the current user's default email header, but instead I'm going to choose to display the current page campaign's email header instead. That's going to be fine. I'm not going to make any changes there. And the reason that is yes, we are going to display the default email header first and foremost. We're actually going to do this when we create our new campaign in the workflow. So it might sound a little bit confusing, but anytime a new email campaign is created, it is going to say that by default, that campaign is going to have the default email header that has been set in the settings, and that is going to then be the current page's campaign's email header in the essence right there. And the reason we're doing that is because here we are allowing our users to make changes to this, and we want to ensure that the next time they come to this page or they revisit this campaign, that it is the change that they've made from the default, if that is the case. We will see this in action when we do our testing, so just hold tight if you still have questions about that. It'll all make sense shortly. Now, the last element that we are going to add to our what you see is what you get email builder is our email body. Now, to display that the best and to have the best functionality, we're not going to add a single line input field here. We're actually going to add a multi-line input. This will allow our users to add line breaks to the email body and just to have that flexibility in the formatting. So let me go ahead. I'm going to add a multi-line input field to my email builder group. And before I make any changes to my placeholder on my initial content, I'm just going to change the name of it as usual. Let's call this email body. Let's head to our layout tab. I'm going to choose to align this in the center. I'm going to remove that it's fixed width so that it looks aligned nicely here. Let's just say that we have a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of 600 so that it fits nicely in line with our email header. I'm also going to, just to see that we can have some more room to work with, I'll make the minimum height of this to be 200 pixels. I will fit the height to the content if it goes any more than that, but this is just a visual thing. This is not going to have any impact on the actual email send that we do. So just a quick note there. I'll then add, let's say, let's go 20 pixels of margin to the top, and just for safety, 10 to the left and 10 to the right. And lastly, because this is the last element in our group, I will also add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom there. Now, as you can see here, there is a light gray border around this multi-line input element. So although we do want to let the user know that they can make edits to this, it's not the same way that we want to do for our single line inputs here. So I'm just going to remove that border. We don't really need it. I'm going to set some placeholder and some initial content so the users will be able to see that they can make edits to this just fine. Now, whenever a user creates a new campaign, they're going to see this page and see that it just says the word type here, but I want to show that they can add more text. So let me add some more placeholder text to this box here. Let's say type here, you can add line breaks and other text here. Simply place it in this section. Let's see how that goes and let's see how that looks. So as you can see, it just shows that there's a little bit more room to move, and our users, when they click this, it'll make sense, and they'll know that they can add line breaks and they can add a body to this input element. But what if the user is returning to this campaign after they've already added some body text here? So what we are then going to display instead as the initial content, if there is initial content in this campaign, we are going to display dynamic data, which of course is the current page's campaign's body. Now this text element is fine by me, but I want to just take a quick pause and let's actually test this and let's see what it looks like in a preview version of our app. So to do that, I'm actually going to have to make a test campaign in my database, in my development app database. So I'm going to head to my data tab on the left here. I'm going to head to app data, and I'm going to head to my campaigns section here, and I'm going to actually create a new entry. And the reason I'm doing this is so that when we run a preview, we can actually see our initial content, not our placeholders. It's not going to be a blank slate. We can actually see what our users might see when they create a new campaign. So let me click new entry. Now the body of this test, let's say hi there. This is a test. Thanks, Shane. Cool. The name of this campaign will just be test campaign. That's fine. The slug, because I want to display this as a preview, I'm just going to say my slug is test123. I'll explain what this means shortly. The company I'm going to say, if I say test, it comes up with my unique ID for my company, that's fine. The subject line, I'm just going to say this is a test, and I'm going to display the email header as the default email header that I showed in the last module, which will be the default email header of this application. So there we go, I've added my default header. I'm going to hit create, and to view this test, I have to go take a bit of a strange route. I'm going to head to my all users, and I'm going to run a test as this user because I want to display the data that is associated with this company. So if I hit run as, it will open my email builder. Let me just get out my head out of the way. Logged in as that test user. Now, as you can see, this is a blank campaign, so we have all of our placeholders here. However, I want to show my initial content or my default content. So to do that, let me head to my URL, and I'm going to add a slash. I'm going to say test123 because this is the slug of this particular campaign. When I hit that, I can see my initial content that is associated with my entry in the database. Now, if you recall, when I set the type of content for these pages to be campaign, I am pulling the information or the data for this page from a campaign record within my database. Now, just to show that this is fully interactive, because we made these input fields, I can add text to the campaign name or to the subject line. I can also add text to the body. We'll just say hello here. Now, I haven't set my workflows to save this information, but we will add that so that when our users make changes to this campaign, they will be saved to the associated record in the database. So we'll do that shortly, but lastly, I just need to add one more button, which is the send email button at the bottom of this email builder. So let me head back to my bubble editor. I'm going to head back to my design tab, and I'm going to add another button to the bottom of this page. Let's add a button, not into the group. I'm going to add it underneath, and this time this is going to be my send email. And the label is just going to be send email. Now, a little bit of styling. I'm going to make this element, let's make this element the same width as this, what you see is what you get group. So let's make it 650. Actually, let's make it not a fixed width. Let's make it a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of 650 pixels, just so that it looks the same. Let's align it in the center. And I will add 20 pixels of margin to the top. As it's the last element on my page, I'll say 20 pixels of margin on the bottom, and just for safety, 20 on the left and 20 on the right. So that looks great. Before I add my workflows, I'm actually not going to have this button to be the trigger of the actual send. I'm just going to add another step just for sanity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually display a pop-up whenever the user clicks this send email button, just as a confirmation and to display the amount of recipients that will receive this email. So to do that, I'm going to add I'll add a couple of pop-ups, and I'll tell you why as I build them. So let's add a pop-up group to our page. Let's first and foremost, we'll call this one pop-up. We're going to call this one no recipients. And this is going to be a column layout. Let's say we're going to keep it as a minimum width of 0, and we're going to say a max width of 450 pixels, let's say. We're going to have the minimum height of 320, that's fine, and we're going to fit the height to the content. I'm happy with that. Now, we are going to display this pop-up if the current user has no recipients in their database. It's going to be a bit of an alert, but it's also going to be a bit of a blocker to say, hey, before you send an email, you actually have to add some recipients. So let's add that instruction. I'm going to add first and foremost just a text element. We'll align it to the center of this pop-up. Let's also add 20 pixels of margin to the top, 20 to the left, 20 to the right, and let's go 10 to the bottom. That's fine. And now I'm going to say here, no recipients. This is going to be a bit of a header. Because it's a header, let's make it a bit larger text. Let's go 24 pixels and let's also bold it. That's great. We're going to now add another text element underneath with a bit of an explanation. Let's say you don't have any recipients in your database. Please add them before sending this campaign. That's great. Let's add some style. Let's center align this text, and we're going to also center align it into the grading scheme of our pop-up. We are going to leave it fixed width and height because we are fitting to the height and width of the content. That's fine. Let's add, let's go 20 pixels margin to the left, 20 to the right, and let's go 20 to the bottom. Now, as you can see, there is a bit of spacing around here. So I'm actually going to change the height of this element. Let's just go minimum height of 0. I'm happy with that sizing. That's just going to fit nicely around our current text elements. I think that looks okay. So this pop-up will appear if the user doesn't have any recipients in their database. What happens if they do? We want to display a different pop-up. And this is going to be where we display how many recipients are in their database. And then we're going to add a button to actually trigger that workflow to do the sending. So let's get started. I'm not going to create a new pop-up. I like the style of this, so let's simply copy and paste this pop-up. We can see here that we have our pop-up no recipients copy. So let's next rename this to be, let's say the pop-up is going to actually send the email. Now, rather than it saying no recipients, let's say confirmation to say that yes, you are confirming that you want to send this email. We're going to say confirmation. And for our text instruction, rather than saying you don't have any recipients in your database, let's display how many recipients they have. So let's say, are you sure you want to send this campaign to your, I'm going to write number of recipients, but I'm actually going to replace this number of because I want to instead display that number. So let's get rid of that. I'm going to insert dynamic data. And what we are going to do here is we are going to do a search for, we're going to do a search of recipients where the company of that recipient equals the current user's company. Now, essentially what that is basically we are instructing Bubble to do a search in the database, look for the recipient's data type and see all the recipients where their company, their associated company, the name of that company is the same as the company as the current user. So we don't want to display any other company's recipients. We only want to display the current user's company's recipients. Now, if I click away from that, I can choose to actually display the count of recipients. So this is the number of recipients. So if there are 10 recipients in the database where the company equals the current user's company, that number will display as 10. Let's make that bold text. So let's do search for recipients, count recipients, 10, bold that. So essentially in that instance where we have 10 recipients in our database, we are saying here, are you sure you want to send this campaign to your, sorry for my spelling mistake, to your 10 recipients. I'm going to add a question mark just to say this is a question, do you want to do this? Lastly, we are going to add a button for the user to say, yes, I want to send this email to my recipients. So let's say this button is send email to recipients. Is going to be the label. The label is just going to say, let's say, yes, send. I like that. That looks great. We're going to adjust the layout. We're going to center align it. We are going to also add, let's add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom. We'll go 20 to the left, 20 to the right, just to be safe and just because it's a good habit. Now that pop-up looks great. Now, unfortunately, I can't test what this looks like just yet because I don't have any recipients in my database, in my test database, but in a few modules time, we'll get to see this in action. So now that we have our elements on our page and we have our pop-ups, let's start to add some workflows so that when we do things like click the save button, it saves the changes, click the delete button, it deletes the campaign, or click the send email button, it actually brings up those pop-ups dependent on whether the user has or doesn't have recipients. Let's start with save. So I'm going to head to my save button. I'm going to click that I want to add a workflow whenever the button save is clicked. So what I'm going to do here, the action that I'm going to add is I'm going to make changes to a thing. And the thing that I want to change is the current pages campaign. I'm not going to select any fields here because I'm going to select them in this section here when I add this plus button. Now to ensure that I'm covering all my bases, I'm going to click add all fields and I'm going to get rid of the ones that I'm not going to change within this email builder. So I'm not going to change the current campaign's company. So let's get rid of that one. And I'm also not going to change the status when I click save. All that I'm going to change is whatever I've adjusted in my body or my email header or the name of the campaign or the subject line. So when I make changes to the body, what do I want those changes to be? I want the changes to be the value of whatever is in the multi-line input bodies element. Sorry, I've misspelled that again, the email body. Let me just quickly go and just change that, email body. You might have noticed that, sorry about that. I'm going to head back to my workflow tab. And I'm going to say that whenever the value of within the multi-line input email body is changed, that will be what is associated with the body field within that current page's campaign record. Same goes for the email header. Let's choose that whenever the user changes the picture uploader email header value, that's what we will be storing to our email header field. The name will be the value within the email campaign name field, which is great. And lastly, the subject line, whenever the user changes the value within the input subject line field, that will be what aligns with the record in the database. So let's take a moment to put that to the test. So if I head back to this email, I'm going to refresh this preview. And as you can see, this was the test entry that was in our database. Let's change this to test campaign. Let's call this workflow test. The subject line, let's just add the word workflow as well because we are testing the workflow. This is a test. Let's say this is a test of the workflow. And let me change my email header to my pink and purple email header that I've seen before. So there we go. I've changed the email header, I've changed the body, I've changed the subject line, I've changed the campaign name. If I hit save, let's see what happens. If I head back to my database, to my development database, I'm going to head to all campaigns. And as you can see, it has updated all of the fields where I made changes. So the name of the campaign is test campaign workflow test. The email header you can see is the purple one. The body says workflow and the subject line also says test workflow. So we can see that those changes have been saved. What you will notice, however, is that when I did hit save, there was no alert. So let me quickly head to my design tab and I'm going to add the alert in to say your changes have been saved. Let's click across to add my visual element, the alert visual element. I'm going to change just some styling here. We're going to change the background color to be our green, which looks nice. The font color to be white. And we're going to remove our border so that it's that nice green look. Let's say campaign saved as our alert text there. So campaign saved. I'm going to also position this alert at the top of the page. I'm going to then lastly say that I don't want this to be fixed width. I want this to display right across the width of my screen. And I'll do that by adding a minimum width of 0 and a maximum width of infinite. Now to display that, I have to add it to my workflow. So let's add it as a secondary action to this workflow. What I'm going to do, let's type in the word alert, show message in an alert box. It's automatically said that it is the element alert campaign saved, which is fine. And those timings, we've worked with them before. That looks great. Now, just as a sanity check, let's head back to our email builder. I'm going to hit refresh the page. Sorry, let's head to our email builder preview. And I'm just going to hit save just to see if that happens. Yep, there we go. Our alert has showed up. That looks fine. I'm really happy with that. Now, what if we want to delete our campaign? That is super easy. I'm going to head back to my design tab and I'm going to click on this delete button here. That is going to be the trigger to start my workflow. So whenever button delete is clicked. Now, deleting records in a database is super simple. If we say delete, I'm going to delete a thing. And what am I going to delete? I'm going to delete the current pages campaign. That's fine. Once that happens though, I then want to redirect the user. So let's redirect the user through our navigation action. We are going to direct them to our list of campaigns. So whenever a campaign is deleted, it'll take them back to display all of our list of campaigns so that they can either create a new one or choose a different one. Let's see this in action. So just for use case, I'm just going to head to my app data tab and show that this current entry is shown in our development database. If I head to my email builder tab, let me just refresh this. Now, if I delete this, it should get rid of it and I should redirect to my campaigns list page. So if I delete that, all the information is removed. And as you can see here, it has redirected me to my campaign list page. And if I head back to my database, you can see that entry has been deleted. That's great. The very last workflow or two workflows that I'm going to add is to trigger my pop-ups. So let me head back to my design tab. And now for this last workflow or set of workflows, this send email button will actually serve two purposes or show two different scenarios or two different pop-ups. So if the current user has 0 recipients in their database, we want to show that no recipients pop up. If they do have recipients in their database, we want to show the confirmation pop-up that we created earlier. Now, although there is one element, there are two workflows. It's super easy to set up. Let me show you. So whenever this send email button is clicked, we want to trigger this workflow. Now let's imagine the first scenario. Let's add an action. We are going to, let me get my head out of the way. Element actions, we are going to show an element, and the element that we are going to show is no recipients. What I'm quickly going to do is I'm actually going to I'm just going to copy and paste this because I want to have another workflow that when the send email button is clicked, I want to instead display the send email pop-up. Now, how is Bubble going to tell the difference? How is Bubble going to display the right pop-up dependent on how many recipients are currently in the user database? Now, the way to do this is super simple, and it's with this only when section of the workflow trigger. So I want to show the pop-up no recipients only when, yes, this send email button is clicked, but only when the number of recipients in the current user's database is 0. So let me instruct Bubble to do that. Whenever that button is clicked, I want Bubble to do a search for recipients where the recipient's company equals the current user's company, and I want that to be a count, so I want the number of recipients to show up, and only when the count of those recipients is 0, I want to trigger this workflow. So only when the recipient count is 0, we want to show the pop-up of no recipients. When it is not 0, we want to display the send email pop-up. So let me go to only when the Bubble app does a search for recipients where the company equals the current user's company. When that count is not 0. So it could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be any number above 0. We want to display the send email pop-up. So that way, what we've done, yes, there is only one element, but we have two different workflows. One that runs when the count of recipients is not 0 and one when it is. So let's test this out. Let's head to our preview. I'm just going to go back and hopefully that takes me to the campaign. I deleted it, so it's not going to show here. However, in this example account, I don't have any recipients, so I should be displayed the no recipients pop-up. And when I click that, happy days, it's worked. Now, when this pop-up does show, I can click away and go and add some recipients. And then if I add recipients and then click this button and I have a campaign all set up, it should say, do you want to send this campaign to X number of recipients, how we've wanted it to be. So that is our campaign page done. Let me scroll over to my Notion checklist and tick off what we've done. Yes, we have built the email builder on the campaign page. We set the content type of our page to be campaign, so we display whatever is associated with the current record in the database. We have set it as a what you see is what you get structure, which is great. And we've built the workflows to save or delete a campaign, as well as show the pop-up to send the campaign to the number of recipients, or to say you don't have any recipients yet, go and add them. We're making great progress. Well done, everyone.
Following on from this module, the next section of our course is going to be like an extension of what we've just covered, only in this case, we're going to learn how to create a list of all the campaigns our users will create.
Continuing to work our way through our list of features for our email builder app, the next thing that we're going to create is a page that displays our campaign list. Now, we've already created our individual campaign pages. However, here we are going to display the list of the campaigns that our current user has created. We're also going to create a button which allows the user to create a new campaign. And we will also add a workflow so that when a user clicks one of the campaigns in the list, it takes them to that individual campaign page. A little bit to get through, but let's get right into it. I'm going to head across to my bubble editor, and I'm going to navigate to the campaign list page that we created earlier. And as normal, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ensure that the container layout of this page is a column. And then I'm going to add my reusable header element, which is going to be put at the very top of our page. Because we have set our container layout to be a column, it is going to be first on our page, and then every element that we now add is going to be subsequently added underneath from top to bottom, which is usual with our container layouts. Next, I'm going to create a header group, which is first and foremost going to display a heading to say to the current user that they are on the campaigns list page. And I'm also going to add a button for the user to create a new campaign, which I'll do shortly. So let me first and foremost add a new group container. I'll add it to my page. As you can see, because we've set that column layout, it's directly underneath our header menu. I'm going to set the container layout for this group to be a row, and I'm also going to rename this to be our group header, just our page header. I'm also going to have it as a minimum width of 0. I'll leave the minimum height as it is for now, and let's add 20 pixels of margin to the top, 20 to the left, 20 to the right, and let's go 20 on the bottom as well. Now, just so that I can see what I'm working with, let's also set the background of this group to be a flat color, and I'll choose just this nice light red color so that I can see where I'm adding my elements onto this group. Next, we're going to add our page heading. I'm going to add a text element that will say campaigns. We are going to be displaying the list of campaigns on this page. Because it's a heading, let's set the font size to be 24 pixels. Let's also bold this. And in the layout tab, I also want to vertically align it in the center of this group. Now that that's done, I'm going to add a button to this row container. I'm going to drag my visual element here. As you can see, because we have set this container layout to be a row, they're side by side. However, because it is left aligned, this container, they are directly side by side. What I'm going to do is add my space between alignment option here. So that, as you can see, there is that space between my two elements, which shrinks as the width of our page shrinks if our user is visiting this app on a mobile device or something similar. Next, I'm going to rename my button to be New Campaign. I'm also going to align it vertically in the center, and I'm going to change the label to be New. Now, I'm not going to say new campaign. I think our users will know that when they click new, they're creating a new campaign because we're on the campaign list page. Now, usually I'd build the rest of my page before building some workflows, but let's do it here just so that we can get it out of the way. Whenever a user clicks this new button, I want to trigger this workflow. I want to create a new campaign. So let's add that to this workflow and add as an action. Whenever the user clicks this new campaign button, I want to create a new thing. So let's head to our things option here, and we are going to create a new thing. And the thing that we are going to create is a new campaign. Now here we can set the default fields that we can align with this campaign. Let's just select add all fields here just so that we're ensuring that we're covering all of our bases. And let's go through these slowly. Now the body of my campaign, I'm happy to leave blank. Now, whenever our user clicks the new campaign button, I'm happy that by default, the body section is blank. And the reason that is because we've set some placeholder text. So the user's gonna see that placeholder text and know that they can then go ahead and add their own body copy to that campaign. What you see is what you get builder. So I'm not going to get rid of that. I'm actually just going to leave it in case you want to change that later. But I'm going to next change the company that is created by default whenever that button is clicked. The company that is going to be assigned with this new campaign is going to be the current user's company. This will have importance later on, but for now, just whenever a new campaign is created, the company associated with that campaign is going to be the current user's company. For the email header, I want the default email header to be loaded into this campaign whenever this new button is clicked. So because we've set it up in our settings, we know that the current user's company has an associated default email header. So let's set that as the email header whenever a user clicks this new campaign button. I'm going to say that the current user's company's default email header will be the image that will be loaded and associated with this new campaign record whenever the new campaign is created. Now for the name, similar to what we've done for the body, I'm happy for this to be blank, because when a user creates a new campaign and navigates to that page, they'll see the placeholder text so they can make the edits there. That's fine. Now the status of this campaign, if you recall, we created an option set for this field, and the two options that the user could choose from, or that our workflow could choose from, were going to be draft or sent. Now, because this email hasn't been sent, obviously, because we're still creating it, it's going to be in the status of draft. So let's choose that whenever a user clicks this new campaign button, the status of this campaign is going to be draft. Lastly, for the subject line, I'm happy for that to be empty, so that when the user lands on it, they'll see that placeholder text and they'll create their new subject line on the fly there. Now, lastly, whenever a user creates this new campaign, once they do that, I want to actually navigate the user to that campaign page. So here we get to add our second action, which is a pretty cool one. We're going to navigate the user to a page, and that page destination is going to be the campaign page. But like we said, how are we going to let Bubble know to display the content that aligns with the current campaign in the database? How are we going to say to Bubble to send that data to the page? You can see here, it is this data to send section. What I want to send is the result of step one's campaign. So all the information related to the new record that was created in this campaign section here will be sent to that page. I don't need to choose any of the fields. I'm simply going to send all the data associated with this new campaign record to the page. Let me show what that means. I'm going to just quickly explain this by showing a preview. Let me click this preview tab, and let's create a new campaign. I'm going to create a new campaign which is going to have a blank name. It is going to have my current email header by default. It's going to have all these empty fields here, but as you can see, it's navigated me to this record that I've just created in my database. It's created this new entry, and it is actually navigated to my campaign page with that data sent to this page and already preloaded with all my relevant information. A quick little workflow, but a great one. Let's continue with our campaign list build. I'm actually just going to quickly just show a preview of this just so that we can follow along with it. There's our build as it currently is. Let me remove the style of this heading. We'll go to our layout tab. We'll reduce the minimum height so that it fits to the height of the content. And let's also remove the background color just so that it looks nice. And this is that look that we're going for, similar to what we've done before with our settings page and the like. Next, we are going to get started on the actual build of our campaign list. Now, to imagine what this looks like, let me jump back into my data tab and show you this table. This is essentially what we're going to be building on the front end of our app, a basic display of our list of campaigns. Now, there is some information that we can exclude here. We don't quite need to show the body or the company or the email header in this list, but we can create or recreate this table in essence to show the name, the subject line, the created date, and the status of each of the campaigns that our user has created. Now, as our users continue to create campaigns, this list will grow, and so will the list on our campaigns list page. Let me show you how. Let's head to our design tab, and first and foremost, just going to display my list in my cool shadowed group that I've created earlier. So let's add that group to our page. The style of this will be our shadowed rounded group. Let's name this group campaign list. I'm then going to head to my layout tab. I'm going to remove the minimum width of this. I'm also going to add, let's go 20 pixel margin to the left and 20 to the right. Because it's the last element on our page, we'll add 20 pixels to the bottom just in case. And so that I can have a little bit more room to work with, let's create a minimum height of 200 pixels just so that I have a little bit more room to work with when I add my list. Now for my list itself, I am going to head to my data tab, and I'm first and foremost going to create this header row here. Here's where I'm going to display the labels of my columns, where I will then display the relevant information to that campaign. So let's head back to our design tab. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a group within this larger group. and this is going to be a row. This is going to be my header row where I'm going to display the headings of each of my columns. Let's say group header row is the name of this. I'm going to also just quickly remove the minimum width to be 0, maximum width to be infinite. And I'm going to just have, let's go 20 pixel margin to the top, 20 to the left, 20 to the right. I'm not going to add 20 pixels of margin to the bottom because here is where we're going to display our dynamic repeating data. You'll know what that means surely. Now before I add my elements, just so that I can see what I'm working with, let me just change the background color of this row to be a flat color. Let's choose my nice little pink color that we have. And we're going to display the headings as text elements. So let's simply add a text element first and foremost. And the first column that we are going to show is the name of our campaign. Let me just bold this because it's our heading. And what I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to remove where I've got to say the content, the width of this text element will be the width of the content. So let me get rid of that and let me show you why I've chosen to do that. If I hit Control C and Control V and copy and paste and add another text element, that width of the element will then shrink to share the space of the wider container between those two elements. Now, to see this, to see what I mean, let me just quickly just change the name of this column to be subject line, which is going to be where we're displaying the subject lines of our campaigns. If I do that again, you can see that it is then shared again between the three elements or the three column or the three headings of our table. So let's change this to be created date. And then lastly, as you can see, as you can imagine, if I add a fourth text element, it is again going to be shared. The space is going to be shared. Let's say this is going to display the status of our campaigns. So now, as you can see, we've started to recreate the header that you've seen in this table data section here, which is fine. That's the look we're going to go for. I'm just firstly and foremostly, before I move on, just going to remove my color now that I've seen what I'm working with and seen the row element there. Let me head to my layout tab, and I'm going to choose to have the minimum height of 0, which will then fit the group just nicely around the height of my text elements. Now that I've created my headers, I want to actually display the information specific to each individual campaign in this list. Now, luckily, Bubble makes this super easy. It is called the repeatable group container element. As you can see, now that I've just added that to my page, it doesn't just create one group, it creates a repeating list of groups. And essentially what we're going to do here is add our elements to the first group, and then that will repeat that as we continue to add campaigns to this list, but it is going to display that information dynamically. The data that it will display in the first group is actually going to be the first entry in our list. The second data that it will display in the second group will be the second entry in the like. It's just a really, really cool feature, which you'll get a grasp of when I continue to build it out. Before we do that, let's let Bubble know that we will just be displaying campaign specific information in this group. So let's say the type of content that we are going to be displaying in this repeating group, which is first and foremost just our campaigns, will be the type of content will be our campaigns. So similar to what we've done for our individual campaign pages, we are going to be displaying information specific to an individual campaign in these groups that will then be repeated. But what campaigns do we want to show in this repeating list? We want to show our campaigns, the campaigns that we have created. So let's choose to display the campaigns where we do a search for in our database. We search for the campaigns where the created company equals the current user's company. So we've done this before. We are only wanting to display, or we are only wanting to see campaigns where what we have created, what someone in our company has created. We don't want to see campaigns created by another user. So there we can see that the information will be dynamic in this group dependent on the campaign that has been created by the current user. Now, before I move on, just a little bit of styling as usual. Let's remove the minimum width to be 0. I'm going to leave the minimum height for the moment, and I'll explain why shortly. But let's add 20 pixels of margin to the left, 20 to the right, and let's go 20 to the bottom here, 0 to the top, just so that it looks nice and fits nicely underneath our header there. Now next, we are going to add the text elements where we are going to display the data specific to that campaign item in that row. So I'm first and foremost going to head to my text elements, and I'm going to drag that into this repeating group item here. Now, as you can see, when I add that, it actually adds that multiple times, which is the repeating group in action. Looks really cool. Now, for this column, I'm going to display each of my campaigns' names. So to do that, I'm going to display dynamic data, and I'm going to do something a little bit different here. Because this individual group, or this cell is the word for it, this cell is displaying an individual campaign, we are wanting to see the current cell's campaign's name. We are wanting to see the name of this individual campaign that's in this cell. Because we are searching for that campaign within our database, that's the bit of data that we are wanting to show. Now, as you'll see, because it is being repeated, we are going to, in this first cell, display the name of the first campaign in our database. So if we head to our database here, I'm going to display, you can imagine the first name there. In the second cell, I will display the second name and so on. It's just a really cool way that Bubble indexes and shows a repeating list of all the campaigns or all the different data types. We're going to use this a fair bit in our database, which is really cool. So now that I've talked about repeating groups and how awesome they are, the next thing I'm going to do is add some styling to my cells in my repeating group. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this border. I'm going to remove the gray border around this group. And I'm going to do that, but you'll notice something. So once I get rid of these borders, you will still see that there is a gray line underneath each of the cells. And the reason that is because there is a separator for each of my cells. You'll see here, it's a solid one width line of just this light gray color, which just separates each of the cells. I reckon that looks really great, so I'm going to leave that. I'm then going to change my, actually, let me just have a quick look. I've set the cell container layout to be a column. If I were to add another element, it would stack on top of each other. I don't want that. I want them to be side by side. So I'm going to change this to be a row. Now, if I were to add another text element to this cell, it would stack side by side, but they would be right next to each other, similar to what we saw in the header. Let me show what I mean. Let me copy and paste this text box, and you will see that they are side by side. However, if you recall, if we were to uncheck this box and say fit width to the content, it does extend that to the full width of this cell. I'll do the same for this text box here. While I'm here, I might actually just align these to each of our headers here. Let me do the copy and paste 2 more times, and you can see that we've started to create that table look because all of our text boxes, all of our dynamic data will sit underneath the appropriate header that we see at the top of our columns. Let me just, before I move on, I'm actually going to vertically align all my text elements so that it just looks a little bit nicer, like so, like this. And then I'm going to replace the dynamic data in the other columns. So this one, I'm happy to display the current sales campaign's name. This one, I wanted to display the current sales campaign's subject line. So all I have to do is head to my appearance tab. I'm going to change this dynamic data field to be the current sales subject line. That is fine, I'm happy with that. I'm going to, in this one, display the current sales campaign's created date. Now I can choose how this is formatted or how this is displayed. I like that it looks like this is 6/30/24, but if I were to want to change this to, let's say, June 30, 2024, I can do it like that and that will look fine. And lastly, with the status, I want to display the current cell campaign's status, but I want to display the display, which is the text, either draft or sent word as a text element itself there. So there we have it. We can sort of start to see how a table is formed. You can imagine that as we add multiple campaigns, they'll all have different information. So it won't be repeated. It will be dynamic to the number of campaigns that a user has created. However, one thing that I do want to do is I want to just head back here, and I don't want to set a fixed number of rows. I want this to be dynamic to show as many or as little number of rows that the user has campaigns in their database. So if I uncheck this number of rows to be fixed number of rows, this will rise and fall depending on how many campaigns the user has in their database. The minimum height of each row is 56 pixels. I'm fine with that. If I do head to my layout tab and I change the minimum height of this to be 0, you will see that it will just collapse around the one campaign just to make it look a little bit nicer when we head to our editor. So let's take a quick pause and let's test how we've gone so far. I'm going to head to my preview app. I'm going to hit refresh here so we can see, hopefully we don't have, okay, we have one campaign so far. If I add another one, let me just change the name just so that we can see test 1. The subject line can be test 1 SL as well. I'm going to hit save so that we've saved our campaign. Let me head back to my list of campaigns. We can see here that we have 2 campaigns. Let me just create a third one just so I can show how this list is continuing to build. Let's go test 2, test 2 SL. I hit save, head back. As we continue to add campaigns, the list of our campaigns on our campaign list page grows. The last feature that we're going to build is if a user clicks on one of these rows, it redirects them to that specific campaign page so that they can make edits to that campaign or even send it. Now to do that, there is one thing that we have to do. Rather than, let's say, clicking on one of these individual text elements, we want to allow our users to click on anywhere in this cell to trigger the workflow. However, if we go into our bubble editor, you'll see that all we have here is the repeating group. And as this repeating group list grows, like let's say if we added 4, there's nothing really to click on because we're essentially clicking on everything within this group. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to actually group these elements in another group container, which will then trigger my workflow. Sounds a bit confusing, but let me show you what I'm going to do. Let me select this first text element. I'm going to hit shift and I'm also going to select this text element. I'm going to keep my finger on shift, going to click this text element, and then this one, last but not least, and that will select all of these text elements for me to then take an action on. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to right click, and I'm given this option to group these elements in another container. So check this out on the left here. You see we have on the elements tree our repeating group and all the elements underneath. If I group these elements in a row container, it will then add another group to this repeating group here, where the type of content is campaign, the data source is the current sales campaign, which is fine. That's all what I want it to be. I like it. However, now if I click to add a workflow, that means that anywhere in this group that you see here, if anywhere in that space is clicked, it will trigger the workflow. Just a little step we have to do, but that's just a little bit nicer of an experience for our users. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add my first action, which is I'm going to navigate to a page. And similar to what we've done for our new campaign workflow, the destination where I'm going to go is to a campaign page, but the data that I'm going to send and the specific campaign that I want to land on is the current sales campaign. So that means that if I head back to my preview app and hit refresh, whenever I click on one of these groups anywhere in this space, I will be directed to this specific campaign. Let's take a look. I should go to test 1. There we go. I've gone to test 1. The list is working. The list is interactive. And as you can see, we've completed the creation of that list. That looks fantastic. Well done, everyone. Let's head to our Notion checklist and just mark off what we've done. Heading back here, we have built the campaign list page. We are displaying a list of campaigns in a repeating group. We've added a workflow to create a new campaign by clicking that new button. And lastly, we have added a workflow to navigate to the specific campaign by opting to send the data in the workflow. There we go.
Throughout the next module, I'm going to show you the platform we'll be using to facilitate the sending of the email campaigns that our users have created.
In this module, we're going to step away from Bubble for a short while because I want to introduce you to SendGrid. SendGrid is the platform that will allow us to send our campaigns as emails to our list of recipients in a matter of seconds. SendGrid is a trusted platform and integrating it with Bubble is super simple. We're going to walk through it in this module. However, first I want to talk to you about domains. Now, with your email builder app, whenever you send an email, it'll have to come from somewhere. And you can create a custom domain so that when your recipient receives your email, they know who it's from, it's branded to how you send it out, and it's trusted by email inboxes so it doesn't get caught up in spam filters and the like. For my example, I've registered emailechidna.com through GoDaddy, which was super simple to do. It only cost me less than $20, and I recommend you set one up for yourself, as well as a custom email address. I've set up hello@emailechidna.com through Gmail. You can choose your own email provider like Outlook or the like, or even maybe a different domain name provider. I've just chosen GoDaddy because it's nice and simple, but you can choose your own one. It's pretty critical for the email builder sending functionality. Just wanted to make sure that you have your own setup. Just wanted to cover that before we get into today's module. So once you've set yours up, I recommend heading to SendGrid.com and creating a new account, which you can do for free and in a matter of seconds. I've already set one up, so I'm going to go to another tab and show you the SendGrid dashboard. Now here we will be authenticating our domain and authorizing our sender, so who is going to be sending the emails on behalf of our email builder app. And we'll also build our custom email template in SendGrid as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my sender identity. So I can do that from the dashboard here just by clicking create sender identity. And it will take me through to this page where I can enter the information of my sender. Now it's going to have a from name, which for me, it's going to be email echidna. You can change this dependent on the email settings or the email campaign that you create. This is actually customized, but this is just a bit of a rule of thumb or just a bit of a default. The from address, I'm going to enter the custom email address that I've created, emailechidna.com. The reply to address I'm going to have as the same. Any email that I send from this account, I want to be able to reply to this account. And here I have to enter some company details, which is just a bit of a security thing and helps to comply with some anti-spam laws. So let me do that and then I'll click create. Now, once I've created that sender identity, it will send me an authentication email, which I'll just have to check after I click close. And I'll do that by heading to my Gmail account. Let me head across again. Let me go to my inbox, and here we go. I can verify the sender. Let's verify this single sender by clicking this button. So it looks like the sender identity has been verified, which is a great start. So once I've done that, we can see that the single sender has been verified. However, there is one more step, and that is to authenticate my domain. Now, if I were to send an email as it is, it would say your email has come from Email Echidna, but on behalf of SendGrid. We want to authenticate the domain so that all of the links within our email also are aligned to Email Echidna, but we want to essentially move the SendGrid branding. And to do that, we have to authenticate our domain. Let me get my head out of the way. And I have to actually re-click sender authentication to be taken back to this page. Now here, as I said, I want to authenticate my domain. And if I click get started, let's see what happens. So here I'm given a few options to enter. The first is my DNS host, which I mentioned is GoDaddy. For you, it might be a little bit different, but that's fine. I would also like to brand all the links within my email to be this domain. So essentially not sendgrid.net. I want to use my own domain. So let's click yes. I'll click next. Then I will say who I'm sending my domain from. So that from domain is emailechidna.com. Let's click next. And now I have to install what are called my DNS records. If you're new to domains and the like, this is all new, but we're going to walk through them slowly. Essentially what we have to do is we have to copy all of these DNS settings. So depending on the type and the host and the pointing to, we're going to have to copy all of these into the DNS settings of our domain host provider here. So as you can see, there are a few already. But let's get started. So all we have to do is click add new record, and then we're simply just going to add each of the individual authentication settings from SendGrid. So first and foremost, let's copy this CNAME. Going to choose the CNAME option. I'm going to write it here, and then I'm going to head back and I'm going to copy to point it to sendgrid.net. We're going to go like that. The time to live, which is that TTL, I can leave as half an hour, that's fine. There is actually a fair few that I need to add, so I think we're just going to skip ahead to when I've added these rather than you watching me add them one by one. Now that we've added all of our records, let's hit save and let's double check that yes, it's all fine. Yes, change everything that you've said here, which is great. I'm happy with that. And after all the updates, it looks like it's successful. It says it might take 48 hours. Let's see how we go. Heading back to SendGrid, let's say that yes, I've added all these records and I'm going to hit verify and let's see what happens. It worked. How good's that? Didn't take 48 hours. It authenticated straight away. That's awesome news. Let me head back to my sender authentication. It looks like awesome. My domains have been authenticated. My single sender has been verified. Now, when I send my emails, they're going to come from my email echidna custom domain. That's great. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's link Bubble with SendGrid. Now to do that, super simple. On Bubble's end, we are going to use an existing plugin. Let's scroll across to our Bubble editor. And I'm on my plugins tab, which you can see on the left here by this little electrical point icon. That's clever because it plug it in. I'm going to add a plugin here. Now the plugin that I'm going to add is simply this SendGrid plugin. If I type in SendGrid there, and I'm going to choose this SendGrid plugin created by Copilot. Super easy to use. I'm going to hit install, click out of this, and here we can see there are a few things that we have to add to this plugin. Now the first is this API key. Now, if you're not familiar with APIs or how they work, essentially what we're doing is we are creating a connection between two services or two apps, and in our case, between SendGrid and Bubble. Now we want that connection to be as secure as possible so that there's no malicious hacking or anything of the like. We want to make sure that that is secure. And the way that that's done is through the use of a key. Essentially, a key is a way for Bubble or for SendGrid to check with each other that yes, this is where we want to send the information to, and yes, this is secure, and yes, this has been set up. So it's just a way to keep everything nice and safe and secure. Now to find our API key, super simple. I'm going to head back to my SendGrid account here. I'm just going to move my head out of the way again, and I'm going to select this API key section underneath my settings header here. Now when I click this, we will see a blank space here because we don't have any API keys yet, but all I have to do is click this blue button and I can create a new API key. Let's call this API key, let's call this email echidna, that's fine. I'm going to allow full access for this API key, which means it can essentially do everything with all the endpoints. Let's create it, and then we can see our API key here. If I click on it, it copies it. We can't see this again, so make sure that you use it when you copy it. It's just for security reasons. I'm going to delete this after I publish this course, so no one can use it. But I'm going to hit done, and there we can see that our API key has been created. Now from here, I can scroll back across to my plugin section here, and I can add in my API key. Now I am also going to paste my API key under this API key dev section here, which is just a way to allow our two apps to connect with each other, even if we are in the development or the testing environments. Now, I don't think I have to worry about the authorization sections. Hopefully I don't eat my words later in this course. But there we go. We've created our SendGrid account and added the API keys into our plugin, which is a really simple process. So now that that's done, let's head back to our Notion checklist and check off what we've done. We've created a SendGrid account and set up a verified sender. We have authenticated our domain, we have added the plugin into Bubble, and we've connected SendGrid to Bubble via an API key. Nice and simple, well done.
And just like that, that is all I have time to include within this video today. As you can see, we've been building for literally hours, and there's still so many features that I need to uncover in as much detail as possible. If you wanted to watch the rest of my email builder app course, I'd recommend hitting the link in the description of this video, so that way you can get access to the entire course right now. Now, while that full course is going to cost you money, I'm confident that it's going to save you months of time having to learn how to rebuild all of the individual features from scratch. So if you really want to launch your app as quickly as possible, I definitely recommend checking it out. At this point in time, there are still so many features that we need to uncover. We still need to configure our SendGrid template, build a recipients list, as well as add individual recipients to our database, which are the people who will receive our emails, build the workflow to send our emails to our recipients. We then need to store records of our sends to our Bubble app and display those sends in the campaign and recipients record. And of course, build out a reporting dashboard so we can analyze the activity of our email builder app. I truly wasn't lying when I said there's still so many features that we need to walk through. If you wanted to stay up to date with any additional resources we share on this channel, I'd always recommend hitting that subscribe button so that way you can be the first to know whenever the Building with Bubble team drops a new video. For now though, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for watching up to this point of our tutorial today, and I wish you all the best on your own no-code journey.